The main character had been bullied since childhood because he couldn't awaken his magic. Even his girlfriend looked down on him and left him for another guy. But one day, while being bullied by his classmates, he threw a single basic punch that left his attacker unable to fight. Everyone present was in utter shock. It turned out that during a magic awakening ritual, the main character had left the continent's top mages in shock because he had awakened shadow-type magic, and this dark magic was the nightmare of the entire world. On top of that, he also trained his physical strength like a madman, making not only his magical damage but also his physical damage top tier. No one could believe it. This was the power of a boy who had just turned 10, and this got him recruited directly into the Academy's advanced class, making him the top genius among geniuses. You see, the boy grew up on the Eton continent, a place ruled by the Holy Empire Alliance, which held the moon goddess Alucia as its supreme faith. But behind that peaceful facade, in the distant borderlands, there were legends of an ancient forgotten bloodline, and it seemed this boy was a part of that very secret. Right on his birthday, his mother suddenly said she would teach him divine arts. Hearing this, he could barely hide his excitement for that power. At least from now on, when I go hunting, I won't be pushed around anymore. But his joy was short-lived as his mother threw a bucket of cold water on his excitement, stressing that learning divine arts was not at all simple. And not just anyone on this continent was worthy of touching it. All divine arts were under the control of the Holy Church, and they had erected countless barriers. Ostensibly, they were to stop evil forces, but in reality, they were also to control power. To step through that gate, shades. The first condition was to fully comprehend the meaning of the ancient language, a language used as a protective lock. As she said this, the mother's tone suddenly changed. She uttered a string of strange sounds that he had never heard before. The last phrase rang out clearly: "Power is reserved only for the truly strong." What no one expected was that the boy, almost as a reflex, opened his mouth and replied in that very same language. The content of his reply was even more startling. "The truly strong must be the one who possesses wisdom." In that moment, his mother was stunned. She couldn't understand how her son knew the ancient language, but he simply pointed to an old forgotten book in the corner, saying he had learned it from there. At this, his mother's expression changed completely, a mixture of joy and astonishment. She slowly sat down and revealed the truth. That book was the holy scripture of the goddess Alucia. Inside it recorded 7 tales of the divine arts, as well as the ancient language he had just used. The more the boy listened, the more confused he became. He was certain he had seen that book in the attic before, but he couldn't understand any of its contents then. So why could he read it now? The answer was simple. Because you just passed through the first gate. Only those acknowledged by the goddess can understand the Holy Scripture. In other words, you have been chosen. That very night, the most important ritual began. The birthday gift was no longer a simple promise, but a chance to step into the goddess's palace, a place where his destiny would be completely changed. Not long after the ritual began, a gentle voice echoed, asking him if he yearned for power. Without hesitation, he frankly admitted that he did. And that honest answer unlocked the next step. The space around him transformed, and statues of gods gradually appeared before his eyes. This was the ritual to unlock the divine arts. Before him lay several different paths: healing, punishment, defense, judgment, prophecy, and even a mysterious choice that hadn't yet revealed its form. Strangely, there were more choices than normal, but at that moment he didn't have time to think about it. The only thing on his mind was the desire to become strong enough to protect the person, his mother, who had raised him all alone. And so he made his decision. He chose wisdom. The voice seemed to consent, but at that very moment, an unusual interference occurred. The power meant for him was knocked off its course, redirected toward an intersection beyond the 6 statues to a 7th statue representing the dark side of the moon. The laws of the world are clear. Everything requires balance, and any power that exceeds what is foreseen must come at a corresponding price. Meanwhile, as the ritual continued in the real world, his mother looked at her son in horror. His face began to be swallowed by darkness, twisting and gradually transforming into a grotesque creature emanating a dark aura. It sent a chill down the spine. In that very moment, Richard's eyes snapped open. Before him was a bizarre scene, a shadowy figure standing beneath a giant moon, while he himself floated in an endless void. With no foothold and no direction, a faint voice echoed in his ear, calling his name, directly making the air grow bone-chillingly cold. In the real world, a panicked Eleni cried out, "My son!" But before she could finish, her whole body collapsed. Her voice trembled with both pain and disbelief. How could this be? Why did it turn out like this? In the chaos, she began to realize something was wrong. What was happening was probably not the enlightenment of Alucia. Eleni's expression instantly changed. Her eyes turned ice cold. Without hesitation, she stepped forward, her hand crackling with electricity as she decisively summoned her power. She stood firm, forcing all of her mana into her palm. A divine art began to form. Not a trace of fear remained, only sheer determination. She forcibly converged the gloomy streams of life force and sent them hurtling toward that moon. But the cold voice rang out again as if confirming something terrifying. It is indeed a creature of shadow. Hearing that, Eleni froze as a splitting headache suddenly struck her. She gritted her teeth against the pain. And then everything abruptly fell silent. The space returned to normal, but this quiet was even more unsettling. Eleni took a deep breath. She already had her answer. There's no mistaking it. Those chaotic things. And they've even reached the domain of the moon goddess. Before her, Richard still lay there, showing no signs of waking up. But his condition was more dangerous than ever. Eleni clenched her jaw as memories of the magical world slowly surfaced. Memories of the countless dimensions that exist. Wandering shadow races. They relentlessly search, relentlessly invade, and step by step, corrode everything they touch. The continent of Eton long ago had been touched by them before. They feed on life and magical energy, using deceitful arts to bend the minds of mortals and turning believers of divine magic into instruments for sowing chaos. In the end, an era collapsed in bloodshed. It wasn't until the Holy Alliance joined forces with the moon goddess that the tide of invasion was finally pushed back. But no one suspected that after all these years, even Alucia had been tainted. Eleni looked at Richard, her heart clenching. He had now become a coordinate, an anchor for the next invasion, like a lighthouse guiding the darkness. If this continues, there are only two outcomes for him. Either he'll be torn apart by the conflicting energies, or his body will be possessed by the most powerful shadow creature and he will lose himself forever. Outside, the moonlight shone down coldly. Eleni clenched her fists. Could this be Alucia's punishment? If I were still the High Priestess, if the ritual hadn't gone awry, none of this would have happened. But regret was meaningless now. She couldn't let her son be devoured. Eleni immediately dashed off frantically, tearing the room apart in search of something. Where is it? Where in the world is it? Until she yanked open a drawer and finally found what she needed, an old letter worn down by time. But as she opened it, it erupted with magical energy. The words on the paper began to glow as clear as if they had just been rewritten. Outside, the light surged in kind, as if resonating with the name inscribed in the letter. A name that touched upon the very laws of the world and was being sent forth. Eleni shot to her feet, her eyes slowly calming. She knew. He had sensed it. Her memory pulled her back 15 years before everything had fallen apart. Amidst the smoke dust and pursuing soldiers, a familiar voice rang out, "Eleni, it's safe here for the time being. There's not much time. Leave holding back the enemy to me. You have to live." Panicked and gasping for breath, she shook her head fiercely. "No, I can't leave you alone." But Gordon cut her off. "There's no more time." He embraced her tightly. His voice grew low but firm. "Take good care of our child." Eleni's hands tightened on his shoulders, trying to hold on, but the words caught in her throat. "But—" Gordon's voice was low, but every word felt etched into her mind. "Our boy. He will carry the demon bloodline of the Archimonde clan. Let him bear this name. If one day you are able to tell him that his father is Migodin Isaiah Satan Toria Ackmond, and raise him to be a true man." The moment he finished speaking, the light erupted violently. He raised his head as if pleading with a higher power. "Lend me the power of the moonlight." Reality snapped back into focus. Eleni gritted her teeth. For 15 years, she and her son had hidden in this place, but now it was no longer safe. Without a moment's hesitation, she summoned her power, her voice ringing with the authority of a high priestess. In an instant, light flooded the entire building. It washed away any lingering danger. Eleni held Richard close, her voice trembling but full of relief. "You're awake." The boy grimaced, his head pounding. He asked, still a bit dazed, What happened, Mom? I remember seeing the full moon, and after that—" Before he could finish his sentence, Eleni gently interrupted, "It's all right. Everything's over now. But Richard's gaze suddenly fixed on something beside him, his eyes wide with surprise. "Mom," Eleni smiled gently, not shying away. "Don't be afraid. This is my true form." Richard slowly began to remember, his voice still laced with confusion. "I chose wisdom." The statue of the seventh goddess appeared, and then everything went blurry. But I remember being pulled somewhere else, a completely different space. It was suffocating cold, filled with the feeling of death. The moon there spoke only one sentence: like the two faces of the moon, you receive wisdom, and with it the truth hidden behind that wisdom. Hearing this, Eleni froze. The truth. She had never heard of such a thing in any enlightenment ritual, for such an ability to exist. Richard continued, "Even though I was barely conscious, I remember those words perfectly." Eleni lowered her head, murmuring as if piecing together scattered fragments of memory. "The truth. Could it be—" But before she could delve deeper into the thought, Richard's voice pulled her back. He spoke in a low tone. "I feel like I can see through everything more clearly. My body feels stronger too. I can see farther, hear better. It's as if the world has no more secrets from me." A complex feeling swelled in Eleni's heart. Gordon's words from all those years ago echoed in her mind. This boy is the one who carries the blood of Archimonde. But she quickly pushed it all down, smiling gently. "All right now. You don't need to think about it anymore. All that matters is that you're safe." Then her voice slowed. "Richard, there's something I need to tell you. You're 10 years old now. You have the right to know." The boy's eyes instantly lit up, assuming it was another surprise. "Oh, did you get me another birthday present, Mom?" Eleni shook her head slightly, her voice soft but heavy. "It's about your father." The smile on her lips trembled. "Do you want to meet him?" Richard stared blankly. He still didn't understand what was happening. "My father, isn't that him?" Eleni looked directly at him, finally revealing the truth she had kept hidden for 15 years. "I'm so sorry. I've kept this from you for so long. Your father, he's still alive." Her voice started to crack. "So many things happened. We were forced to be apart. But if you want to, I believe it won't be long before you can meet him. The person he sent for us should be arriving any time now." But Richard was silent for a moment. Then he slowly looked up, his gaze surprisingly calm. "Mom, do you want to see him?" Eleni froze, unsure of how to answer. But Richard just smiled softly, his voice simple yet firm. "If you want to, then I want to meet him too." His eyes shone completely free of hesitation, and it touched Eleni's very soul. She pulled her son into a tight embrace, tears shimmering at the corners of her eyes. "Thank you, my son." But in that very moment of warmth, the image of Gordon once again flashed through her mind, and a cold thought began to creep in. Perhaps just like that year, the time she had left to protect her child was running out. A few days later, in a peaceful rice field, a young man suddenly looked up toward the distance. Sensing something was wrong, the person next to him asked, confused, "Did someone just enter the village?" His expression immediately darkened, for before them were heavily armored soldiers marching in. The villagers began to murmur, "Heavily armored cavalry, why would they show up?" In a remote place like this, a man stepped forward, a chilling aura surrounding him. It was Madrid. His voice boomed with pressure. "Hey, answer me!" A villager replied, trembling, Yes." The sword in Madrid's hand slowly rose, its cold, sharp blade reflecting the light. His voice lowered, laced with clear killing intent. "Does anyone know where Alani is?" In an instant, the scene erupted into chaos. Things were thrown about, people fell and fled. No one could keep calm. Viru fell flat on the ground, his voice frantic with panic. "Who is Alani? Who's Alani?" "I don't know her." Those around him quickly chimed in. Ilani never heard of her. In a small village like this, who would have a name like that? But just then a soldier spoke up in rebuttal, his voice tense. "Impossible, Captain. The command signal, it definitely came from the direction of this village. That commander is never wrong." Hearing this, Madrid's gaze turned icy. He grunted in response, then spurred his horse forward, his voice devoid of any emotion. "If that's the case, then the only option is to wipe this place clean. Search it thoroughly." At that tense moment, a figure suddenly appeared. A firm voice rang out, "Stop!" Alani stepped out, her steps slow but resolute. Her gaze was calm, looking straight ahead. "I am here." The villagers immediately started whispering, "It's Ilani. Why did she come out?" A soldier immediately shouted, "Stay right there, don't move!" But Modred raised a hand to stop him, his voice low. "Do not be disrespectful." He pulled on the reins, halting his horse. Then he surprisingly dismounted, bowing low in salute. "Greetings, my lady. I am Modred, a trusted knight under Lord Gordon. I have come on his orders." Hearing this, Ilani couldn't help but be stunned. Modred continued, "We've come to escort you back, my lady." Just then the sound of hurried footsteps echoed from the distance. People ran calling to each other, "Hurry! Something's happened at Little Richard's house. I can't believe the cavalry found their way here. Could Ilani have caused some kind of trouble? I haven't seen her for days either." Viru pushed through the crowd, trying to get to the front. "Let me through!" Suddenly someone shouted, "Everyone look at her!" Immediately the air seemed to freeze. Everyone's gaze slowly turned to one of horror. Ilani is an elf. Faced with their stares, Ilani remained calm and spoke. "I know the person you've come for is not me." She turned to Richard and introduced gently. "Richard, this is Sir Modred." Modred immediately bowed his head. "It is an honor to meet you. I am Modred. I am at your service, young master." This scene caused the crowd to erupt once more, those knights bowing to a child, and they called Ilani an elf. "Who on earth are they?" Viru stood amidst the crowd, his face still etched with shock. Modred turned to ask, "My lady, are you both ready? We will depart at once. Lord Gordon must be eagerly awaiting your arrival." Ilani nodded slightly. "We are ready." Richard gently tugged on her sleeve, calling softly, "Mom?" Ilani bent down and smiled reassuringly. "It's all right, Richard. They won't hurt you. We've already talked about this, remember. We're going to see your father." Two hands, one large and one small, clasped tightly, holding so many unspoken feelings. Then they slowly let go, as if opening the door to a completely new journey. Behind them, the soldiers began to shout, "Stop gathering, disperse now! No one is to leave the village," Modred added in a cold tone, "until we have departed." Then his eyes glanced toward Richard, silently assessing him. "So this is Lord Gordon's son, the heir to the Archimonde bloodline." Just then a subordinate ran up out of breath. "Captain Modred, there's a problem." His voice was filled with anxiety. Modred frowned. "What is it?" The man swallowed hard. "We can't find the lady anywhere." Modred's expression changed instantly. "What, didn't she already get into the carriage?" "The lady said she forgot a few things and went back to get them," the subordinate hurriedly explained. "But on the way there was a strange gust of wind, and then we completely lost track of her." Before they could react, a horrified scream echoed from the distance. "This is bad! There's a fire in the village!" Everyone immediately panicked. "A fire where?" The answer left them all stunned. "It's the house of the one who was just taken away. Ilani's house." The subordinate in the back shouted, his voice nearly breaking. "Report!" "The lady. She returned to the house and set herself on fire." Hearing that, Richard's eyes instantly darkened. "No!" Modred, startled, whipped his head around to look at the boy. But before he could react, Richard had already jumped off the horse in a panic, running and shouting, "No, Mom!" Before he could get far, Modred grabbed him tightly. He held him back, not letting him take another step. Richard screamed, his body struggling frantically. "Let me go, Mom! She didn't say it would be like this." Broken cries of despair escaped him as he tried to break free. "Let go of me," Modred said in a cold voice, trying to remain calm. "This was the lady's choice." Before their eyes, the flames completely engulfed the house, burning fiercely as if incinerating life itself. A pure and brave choice, Modred thought to himself, to protect what matters most even at the cost of everything. Truly a woman worthy of Lord Gordon. Please do not fail their expectations or waste all that they have sacrificed for you. A memory suddenly flooded back of Ilani speaking gently to him. "Just a few more days, we will leave this village." At the time, Richard didn't understand why his mother waited until after his 10th birthday to tell him that his father was still alive. Ilani just replied softly, "Because I had no other choice. My carelessness is what led to what happened to you, and the only solution was to ask your father for help." Richard asked curiously, "How did you and father meet?" Ilani smiled gently. "It's too long a story to tell in just a few words. Because of complex forces at play, I had to take you away, change our names, and live in hiding until the ritual occurred. She was forced to reveal her true form. Richard, stunned, asked, "Mom, you're an elf." Alani just laughed, a hint of helplessness in her voice. "I no longer have enough magic to maintain this form. My illness will likely only get worse." Hearing this, Richard's eyes darkened. "You're sick, Mom." She nodded. "I probably won't be able to get through this. One of us has to make a sacrifice." Panicked and still trying to understand, he felt Eleni stroke his head. "While I leave you with your father, I'll have to be away for some time to get treatment." Richard immediately objected. "I don't want to. I want to stay with you." But Eleni gently coaxed him. "Don't be stubborn. It's all for your sake. You want me to get well, don't you?" As she pinched his cheek, Richard still wanted to say something more. But before the words could form, Elani's eyes grew softer than ever. "Remember, no matter where you go, I am always with you." Back to the present. Richard was unconscious, lying on a pile of hay. Madras ordered the carriage to leave first. "Guard him carefully." His subordinate immediately replied, "Yes, sir." Someone next to him hesitantly said, "Knocking out Lord Gordon's son like that." "Is that really okay?" Madras replied coldly. "There wasn't a better way." Another man asked, "Captain, what should we do with this village?" Madras's voice was low. "Keep a few of the women. Take them to other places to spread the news that the lady is dead." The subordinate nodded. "And the rest?" Madras's gaze turned icy. "Lord Gordon doesn't want anyone to know the child's whereabouts. He gave a firm command, surround the village, kill everyone." But in his dream, Richard's memory echoed. "Mom, what kind of person is Dad?" Eleni laughed softly then. "Your father is a genius, a master of martial arts, military strategy, and politics. 15 years ago, he conquered the Elven royal court in the Evernight Forest with his power alone. It sent shockwaves through the entire Holy Alliance, but I haven't heard from him in many years. I only heard that he became a marquise and now lives in a place called Black Rose Castle." Richard lay on the bed, his tears not yet dry. Sob. Suddenly he jolted awake, his eyes wide. "Mom." He shot up, rubbing his head. "Where am I?" His gaze gradually shifted towards the burning fireplace opposite him. A blurry memory surfaced. "I was held down by that knight, Mom." As the memory hit him, his hand froze midair. He quickly scrambled out of bed. "Mom, I have to find her." Richard frantically ran around the room, searching everywhere. Just then there was a knock on the door. "Who's there?" The door slowly opened and a girl peeked inside. "Oh, you're awake." Richard stared confused. "Who are you?" she said calmly. "Your clothes are here. Change into them after you take a bath." Richard glanced down at his body and immediately flushed. "My clothes." He quickly crossed his arms over his chest. "Why do you have them?" The girl put the things down. "I'll leave the fresh clothes here, too. The bath is to the right." "Get yourself cleaned up first. The master wishes to see you." Hearing this, Richard froze. "The master—" He slowly pushed the door open and stepped cautiously into a large chamber. His small figure seemed dwarfed by the space. Richard tugged lightly at his collar. "This place is enormous." The flickering candles on the table created an atmosphere that was both warm and intimidating. Slow footsteps echoed from the staircase. Richard frowned, looking up to see a man leaning on the railing. His deep voice carried down, "So we finally meet." His gaze was sharp as he called out his full name, Richard Archimond. Then with a slight smirk, his voice lowered. "My own flesh and blood." Outside the window, the candlelight cast a faint flickering glow. The silence in the air was suffocating. Gordon sat there, each of his movements slow and deliberate, as his elegant hand sliced cleanly through a piece of beef. It was as if he had everything under his control. In stark contrast, Richard sitting across from him ate in a rushed, unrefined manner, seemingly channeling all his emotions into each bite. Gordon spoke quietly, his tone even. "Life has its ups and downs, but you should never forsake the simple pleasure of a meal. That's what Elian always used to say. You're so much like your mother." At those words, Richard froze, his eyes darkening. The meat in his hand suddenly tasted like ash. He slammed his fork down on the table. Gordon carried on as if nothing had occurred. "While things did not go according to my predictions, Elian did indeed sacrifice herself for you and for me. She protected you, and she kept my identity hidden from other forces. Therefore, you must understand this, Richard Archimond." Richard's head was bowed, his hand gripping his napkin tightly. "My name is Richard." Gordon immediately dismissed it. "Whether you admit it or not." "Elian never gave you that name. Therefore, you carry the name Archimond. In the end, she entrusted you to my care regardless of whatever she said in the past. The blood in your veins belongs to the Archimond family." His voice grew cold and severe. "It is the blood of House Archimond of the Holy Alliance Empire. Our family was destined to hold the rank of Archduke, a position higher than any current duke. But throughout history, those who carry this bloodline have been too maniacal. And so we were despised by the other powers, becoming a thorn in the side of the established aristocracy. We are considered crude and lawless. And yet those same nobles idolize another man entirely. A man who feasts on raw flesh, demanding it be carved from a living creature no more than an hour before he eats. We call him Philip the Bloodthirsty. And yet he is considered the model of a true nobleman. Do you know why that is? Because he is this empire's greatest emperor. A man of absolute military might, ruthless, bloodthirsty, and erratic, forcing every noble to bow their heads." Richard's eyes widened in shock. "A man like that can rule the entire empire?" Gordon let out a faint, twisted smile. "And yet, we the House of Archimond are seen as mad and dangerous. Therefore, since you carry this blood, you have no other choice. You must become stronger. You must wield power greater than anyone else." Richard's brow furrowed, his eyes blazing with resentment. "So that's the reason. The reason you and my mother were willing to sacrifice everything to fight back against those who rule this world." Gordon stood up and turned his back, his cold voice ringing out as he shoved his hands into his pockets and glanced at Richard. "It's not just that I refuse to be controlled by those useless fools. You're only 10 years old. Do you really think this world is that simple? When you truly understand the truth, perhaps you'll realize that even the people closest to you are no different from that bloodthirsty emperor." Just then, a woman appeared at the door, bowing her head. "Lord Gordon, we just captured—" "Spies sent by other nobles into the territory." Gordon's voice was icy. "How many times has it been now?" She replied, "This time it's an organization involving over 100 civilians." Without a moment's hesitation, Gordon said, "Regardless of their status, dispose of them all. Leave no one." The woman bowed her head. "Yes, my lord," Gordon added. "And another thing, this is your half-brother. As Richard's older sister, from now on, I'm putting you in charge of matters within the castle." The girl maintained her somber expression. "Yes, my lord." Richard abruptly kicked the table hard and shot to his feet. "Half-brother!" He strode straight toward Gordon, his voice full of accusation. "I'm asking you, what in the world was my mother to you?" Gordon lowered his face slightly, his voice chillingly flat. "Now Elian no longer represents anything." Richard froze, his pupils constricting as a dry laugh escaped his lips. "Ha!" Gordon began to speak slowly. "Her final request to me was to entrust you to my care. I believe she placed some kind of wish in you, but I'm not interested. And you should understand one thing, fulfilling your mother's wish will not be simple." He paused for a beat before continuing. "Even though she gave you to me, I will not help you directly, nor will I grant you any power. But in the days to come, while you are kept here, you can only rely on yourself to find a way to seize the opportunities that I allow." Richard clenched his fists, memories of his mother flooding back. He had once asked her, "Mom, after all these years without seeing him, do you still love Dad?" Elian had only smiled then. "I love him. I hope that after you meet your father, you'll like him too." But now Richard bit his lip, tears welling in his eyes, his voice trembling. "No, I hate him." The sound of hooves stopped abruptly, sending dirt flying. Modred pulled the reins, his voice low. "We're almost there." 2 days later, a colossal tower loomed before Richard. The Avarice Magic Tower City. Modred said, "This is the training ground Lord Gordon has arranged for you, young Master Richard." He stood there stunned before he could react. Modred continued, "The one who will be teaching you is waiting inside." Before Richard's eyes was a dreamlike scene. The entire city was bathed in a mystical blue light. Tall, intricate, and sparkling structures stretched out everywhere. He dismounted, lifting his head to look up, unable to hide his astonishment. "Is this the legendary city of magic?" His eyes followed every building, every mage and student passing by, each carrying a different magical aura. Richard couldn't help but exclaim, "These are things I've only ever seen in my mother's books." Meanwhile, Modred was speaking to another man. His lordship said that for old time's sake he hopes you will dedicate yourself to teaching the young master. The other person let out a faint laugh. "Old time's sake, you say? Now I remember." "Your Marquis?" "And still owes me a pile of unpaid materials." Modred immediately countered, "The principal has been paid. It is only the interest which you arbitrarily raised that we refuse to accept." The other man waved a hand. "Fine, forget it. Since I've been entrusted with teaching him this time, you must be well aware of his identity." He glanced at Richard from a distance, his eyes carrying a hint of appraisal. "This kid's magical aptitude is indeed not bad," but then his voice grew colder. "Don't think I'll be teaching him for free. Do you know how many geniuses beg to study under me each year? I've even turned down a few who hold divine right." Modred frowned. "So what are you suggesting?" The other man smirked. "It's simple. First, a test of his abilities. In the world of magic, not everyone could learn magic. Only those with a special constitution or the right bloodline had a chance to touch this power. For this very reason, our screening and classification were always a top priority. At Avarice City, they established a place called the Ranking Spring to test abilities." Mina stepped forward to make an announcement. "Everyone please form a line and wait for your turn to be assessed." The surrounding atmosphere began to grow tense as people stepped up one by one. One student suddenly rushed out. Unable to bear the pressure of waiting, the results were quickly announced. Test Subject 76 has only achieved White-level magic power introductory grade. The crowd immediately started murmuring, "Just another rich kid trying his luck." But clearly there's nothing special about him. So far, no one has even reached the intermediate level. Modred leaned down to reassure Richard. "When it's your turn in a moment, just step into the spring's magic zone to create a resonance. The results will be available right away, but you'll have to endure it for a bit." When Test Subject 77 was called, the crowd stirred again, all eyes turning to a boy in simple clothes. Someone sneered. "You can tell he's not from a magic academy just by looking at him, and he's so young. I wonder if he wandered into the wrong place." Richard stepped forward and stood before the ranking spring. The announcer's voice echoed, "You are required to remain within the testing area." But as soon as he made contact with the energy stream, he immediately grimaced. It felt as if something was invading his body, so painful it was almost unbearable. From below, Modred shouted, "Young master, try to endure it. Don't let Lord Gordon down." Those words made Richard remember what Gordon had said. "You have to seize the opportunities yourself." He gritted his teeth, his gaze resolute. "I absolutely will not be looked down upon." Time passed. The crowd's jeers gradually turned to astonishment. "That kid has been enduring it for over 10 minutes. At that moment, Mina held up the assessment orb, her voice rising. "The results are in yellow-level magic power, high grade." But just as everyone was processing this, a surge of black energy suddenly erupted. Richard's eyes flew open, his pupils constricting. A blurry image of a castle flashed through his mind. The pain intensified violently, and he let out a loud scream, throwing the entire area into chaos. The crowd panicked. "What is that black energy? We've never seen magic like this before." The warning system blared continuously, detecting a dangerous abnormal fluctuation. The surrounding mages had no idea what was happening. His movements and the source of his power were completely unknown. Mordred stood frozen, his face pale. That is a creature of shadow. In that very moment, a memory of Eleni's warning flashed through his mind. This is precisely why I must ask for Godden's help. Even though contacting him will cause a huge stir among the nobility, I have no other choice. She had looked at Mordres and pleaded, "Please protect Richard." At that time, Mordres had knelt, placed a hand on his chest, and swore on his life to protect the boy. Back in the present, Mordres immediately dashed towards Richard, but he was blocked by a blinding yellow light. He could feel it clearly. This shadow power was too strong. His human body could barely get close. Mina panicked, screaming for backup. The ranking spring showed a massive fluctuation. Immediately after, a beam of light descended from above. A voice boomed, ordering everyone to stand back. Mordres's eyes widened. A legendary mage had appeared, so Helen landed from above and immediately used her magic to restrain Richard. Her expression grew serious. This child bears the mark of a shadow creature. At that moment, Richard, his face contorted by darkness and his eyes like bottomless pits, suddenly broke into a grotesque smile as if controlled by something. But in the blink of an eye, he lost consciousness. He collapsed to the ground. Mordres called out anxiously but got no response. Suellen merely glanced at him and said curtly, "He's passed the evaluation." Mordres was stunned, but she just smirked slightly. "Qualified enough to be my student." Night fell the sky, sinking into a heavy blackness. A flickering flame burned in Richard's dream. He walked through a sea of fire, calling out, "Mother!" Ahead. Eleni's silhouette appeared, but she didn't turn back, only softly calling his name. Richard tried to reach for her, but the image gradually faded. He woke with a start, gasping for air, cold sweat running down his face. "Mother?" A voice spoke from beside him. "Ah, you're awake." Richard snapped his head around his eyes, wary. "Who are you?" The other person spoke gently to reassure him. "Don't be afraid. I am Popovic. The legendary mage Suellen asked me to look after you. I will also be in charge of teaching you basic magic from now on." Richard raised a hand to his head, still dazed. "Suellen." He looked down at his own hands, confused. "My hands? What did they do back then?" Popovic explained. "A few hours ago you had an incident at the Ranking Spring. I have been treating and monitoring you since then. You probably don't remember it clearly." Richard tried to recall, only remembering being tested in the pool. Then everything became a blur. Popovic shook his head gently. "Don't force yourself to remember. Everything is fine now." Richard flinched, his eyebrows shooting up and his eyes widening. "Oh, right, where's Mordres?" Elsewhere, Suellen looked up at the sky, her voice low. "That kid. He has no outstanding elemental aptitude, but his spiritual power is exceptional, combined with the previous test results, so he does have innate magical power. It's just, everything is too balanced. No clear weaknesses, but no particular strengths either. So why would a shadow creature have its eyes on him?" Mordres answered curtly, "Because he carries the bloodline of the Archimond family." Suellen tilted her head, a flicker of interest in her eyes. "A physical body, going against the power of shadow. Do you have any idea how that will end?" Mordres didn't hesitate. "Protecting young Master Richard is my duty." She smirked. "Willing to lay down your life without a second thought, huh? I've known you for so long, but I never expected you to be this loyal. Oh, right. The examination fee, plus your treatment costs, comes to a total of 116,000 imperial gold." Mordres lowered his head. "We'll owe you for now." Suellen immediately glared at him. "How long do you plan on owing me? This isn't a charity." Mordres cut her off. "Lord Godden has agreed to negotiate the price you previously proposed." Suellen arched an eyebrow. "Ha! For that child. You're willing to pay such a high price." Mordres crossed his arms. "As you can see, the shadow power in young Master Richard is extremely dangerous. Sooner or later it will take his life. The only way is for him to stay by your side. Only a legendary mage can control it." Suellen smiled, full of calculation. "So what are you planning to pay me with?" "The 2 domains in Godden's hands aren't bad. I want 15% of the profits. Either one will do." Mordres eyed her speculatively. "The space-time," she laughed. "No, I want Nolan's time." Mordres shook his head. "That condition exceeds the limits Lord Gordon authorized." Suellen replied coolly, "Then I can't guarantee that I can teach the boy how to resist the power of shadow." Mordres sighed. "As expected, you're as greedy as ever. I will discuss this again with the Marquis, but I hope you can make a concession, so the deal can succeed." She covered her mouth with her hand and chuckled. "Fine, I'll concede a little. During the next prayer ceremony at the Eternal Dragon Hall, I'll lend Richard a hand. How about that?" Mordres nodded. "Remember your words. I will return to ask for instructions." Suellen turned to leave. "I'll be waiting for your answer," Mordres said softly as she walked away. "I'm counting on you for the young master." Farewells were said. Night fell. The green tower glowed amidst the silence, its yellow lights creating a mystical scene. In his room, Richard lay tossing and turning in bed. Restlessly, he turned over and over. He lay on his back, hand on his forehead, sweat beading down. Vague images flashed ceaselessly in his mind. The scene from the ritual earlier returned to him, half real, half illusion. Richard suddenly shot up in bed. Is this reality? The feeling was too clear. He held out his hand, and strange numbers immediately appeared before his eyes. Richard rubbed his eyes, thinking they were playing tricks on him, but when he looked again, his pupils contracted. A faint blue ring of light appeared around his eyes, and from then on, wherever he looked, stat panels would appear. He mumbled, "What are these things?" He looked at the wall. The bookshelf, the lamp, they all had information. He turned to the cabinet and other objects, and it was the same. Richard stood frozen, his face blank. What is happening to me? Water splashed as he bent down to look at its surface. Countless tiny particles floated in the air as he looked at his own reflection. With a bewildered expression, he reached up to touch his eyes, then reassured himself it wasn't a dream. He tilted his head, clearly feeling his body had changed. His vision was better, his hearing sharper. It felt just like it did during the ritual. Richard began to observe more closely. These numbers seemed to have their own meanings. When he looked at the lamp or the shelf, he could see their dimensions. Quantity. Then looking at the cabinet by his bed, information about the material became clearer and clearer. He could even read detailed data just by looking at a sword. His face gradually tensed with a mix of fear. I can see the true nature of objects. A sudden black aura appeared around Richard. He clutched his head in pain, gritting his teeth. It was just like that moment, the choice during the ritual. Outside, the moon hung high in the gloomy, silent space. The next morning, a series of urgent knocks echoed. "Student Richard, don't be late." He opened his eyes. Today was the first day of his magic learning life. Arriving in front of a small wooden room, Richard asked in confusion, "Aren't we supposed to go to a classroom?" The surrounding students bowed. "Greetings, Teacher Popovich," he replied. "Good morning." Richard pointed towards the stream of people walking by. "Shouldn't we be going that way?" Popovich explained, "You're not old enough to study with them. Besides, today is your first lesson. The legendary mage instructed me to teach you carefully. Let's go inside." The two entered the wooden room. Richard looked around, puzzled. This little shack is the classroom. Mr. Popovich just smiled and told him to calm down, then pointed his hand at a clock. A flash of yellow light burst forth. He said, "It'll be here very soon." Before Richard could understand, he instinctively took a step back. The door in front of them opened, and white smoke began to spread from the floor, enveloping the entire space. Richard frowned slightly when he heard Popovich say cryptically, "We've arrived." Immediately after, the scene before him made his eyes go wide in utter shock. Popovich stepped in first, and Richard hurriedly followed. And then a strange space opened up. The teacher turned back and slowly introduced it. "Welcome to the mirrored classroom. From today on, I will be in charge of your introduction to magic. Just call me Teacher Popovich." Without giving him time to adjust, he declared, "The first lesson begins now." The opening lesson wasn't about flashy spells, but something far more abstract, how to observe and think about the world of magic. Popovich explained, "Primordial power is the foundation. It constitutes everything. The entire world is built and expanded from it. In the chaotic void, countless worlds exist, each with its own rules. These rules form the skeleton of a world, and the spaces are the blood vessels that nourish everything." He gave an example. The continent of Noland, where we are standing, is a high-level space belonging to the main world. As he spoke, a small flame appeared in his hand, burning and floating in midair. To a normal person, it was just an obvious magic spell, but Popovich looked straight at Richard. His voice grew deeper. "If your consciousness reaches a higher level, observing from a different perspective, then what you see and hear may not be real. This mirror room is the same. Everything is just an image reflected into your consciousness through your perception." Richard stood there, one eyebrow raised unconsciously, stroking his chin, his mind spinning with new concepts. Space rules observation isn't real. He was clearly trying to piece it all together. Popovich raised the flame higher, then sighed softly. "I know these things are too difficult for you to understand right now. But this was the legendary mage's request. Regardless of your age, I must tell you the truth. Although profound, these are the very things that will help you understand and use magic later on." He continued, "As living beings in the main space, our magic is tied to the rules of this world. Therefore, the first step in learning magic is extremely important." His gaze rested on Richard. "Your assignment for the next 3 months is to build a magical composition that is uniquely your own." Hearing that, Richard seemed to freeze on the spot. My own magic. The thought kept repeating in his mind. Popovich only added one more thing, "That's all for today. Starting tomorrow, you must be on time for class." Richard was still lost in thought, but responded mechanically, "Yes." 2 months passed quickly in the legendary mage's domain. A magic portal opened, and Sue Helen stepped out with a serene look. Her white hair and skin stood out in the dim light. Those around her immediately bowed their heads in welcome. As she walked in, she casually remarked, "This debt collection trip took almost 2 months." Her eyes swept over everyone, her voice carrying a hint of curiosity. "Did anything major happen while I was away?" Someone immediately reported, "A suspicious monster has appeared north of the Tower City. There's an urgent mission that requires the legendary mage to handle." Sue Helen took off her hat, looking unimpressed. "I'm not interested in those kinds of missions." Then, as if suddenly remembering something, she turned to ask Popovic, "How's that kid Richard doing lately?" Popovic handed Sue Helen the magical composition sheet, his voice filled with a touch of pride. "The boy, Richard, has an extremely high aptitude for comprehension. He can already use basic magic. Furthermore, there's a surprise. Please take a look, Legendary Mage." Sue Helen took it, her eyes narrowing slightly. "This is a magical composition. He's already at this stage." Popovic smiled, clearly unable to hide his satisfaction. "He has not disappointed your expectations. That child has an extraordinary gift for magical composition. In just 2 months, he managed to reduce his error margin to 0.01 centimeters, and with extremely high stability." The surrounding mages immediately started murmuring, "An error margin of 0.01 centimeters, that level of precision, is only achievable by high-level archmagi who have undergone years of training." Someone even guessed it was the work of a magical composition expert. But then Popovic shook his head. "Unfortunately, you're all wrong. This is the work of a student who has just begun his training." The entire crowd was nearly speechless. "A student? That's impossible." Just then, someone pointed towards the dorms, their voice panicked. "Look!" All eyes turned in unison. In the night sky, magical fireworks were exploding brilliantly. This was accompanied by strong energy fluctuations in the middle of the dorms where magic is forbidden at night. The sight stunned everyone. At the center of it all, Richard stood there. He frowned slightly, then broke into a smile. Finally, a success. After 2 months of non-stop practice, he had finally managed to stabilize his ability to see through the essence of matter, and, with that, he completed his very first magic formation with his own hands. Popovic stared at the scene, unable to hide his astonishment. These fluctuations, they're definitely Richard's. That kid, he finished an assignment that should have taken 3 months in just 2. And not only that, he even created his own original magic, surpassing most professional mages. Talent like this is truly rare. So Helen turned and asked, during this time, "Were there any fluctuations in his physical condition?" 4. Popovic held out a golden orb, explaining, "While he was using magic, I could sense fluctuations in Richard's aura. Although there were signs of instability, he was still trying to control it." After hearing this, Sue Helen looked towards the dorms, his gaze deepening. "In that case, it's about time to let him begin true school life." 1 month later, at the Thumlam Magic Academy, the opening ceremony was bustling with activity. Mina stood at the main gate, reminding everyone, "Today is the first day of the new semester. No one is allowed to be late." A crowd of students rushed past, panting and groaning about being late. Amidst the crowd, Richard appeared. He walked up and said, "Professor Popovic told me to come here." Hearing that, Mina turned around. The moment she saw him, she froze for a second. "It's you." She quickly recognized him as the boy who had caused a stir at the ranking spring half a year ago. He was much taller now. She led Richard through the academy's grand gate, introducing each area. "The bridge ahead leads to the dorms, which have already been assigned. Then there's the teaching district where you'll be studying from now on." Finally, they stopped in front of a classroom. Mina said, "This is your first magic theory class. You're a little late, but it's fine for a new student. Just follow me inside." She looked at Richard once more and said, "If you feel out of place, just let me know. After all, you're still young. There's quite a big age gap between you and the other students." But before she could finish, Richard cut her off, his voice firm. "I'll be fine, miss. I can take care of myself." From the moment he stepped into the classroom, the atmosphere was unusual. The students were gathered in groups, whispering, their eyes filled with a mix of curiosity and excitement. Rumors about the new student had been spreading for a while, that he came from a powerful background, that he was a rare genius. Someone even claimed he was the disciple of the legendary mage. But the more they heard, the more skeptical everyone became, because he was apparently very young. Just as the classroom was getting noisy, Mina walked in and tapped lightly to get the class to quiet down. Then she quickly announced, "Today we have a new student joining us." When Richard was called up, the entire class's attention immediately focused on him, a kid who was clearly much younger than all of them. Yet he stood there perfectly calm. The moment his introduction was over, the classroom erupted in murmurs. Some were surprised, others were doubtful, and one person even asked him directly, "Is it true, are you really the legendary mage's disciple?" The whole class practically held its breath, waiting for an answer. But Richard calmly denied it, stating clearly that he had never even met the mage. "I'm just a normal student here to learn like everyone else. Professor Popovic is currently my instructor." After speaking, he even gave a small smile, as if the whole matter had nothing to do with him. His answer left the entire class stunned. Many started to think it was all just a misunderstanding. But in a corner, Papin lowered his head, his fists clenched, his eyes dark with resentment. He clearly didn't believe a word and was simmering with frustration. Mina quickly restored order to the classroom and returned to the lecture, but the atmosphere remained slightly tense. When the bell for the end of class rang, the tension immediately vanished. Students cheered, some making plans to hang out, others running back to the dorms. The classroom became lively again. In contrast to all that, Richard just stood there, staring at the notebook in his hand with a bored expression. He had learned all of today's material long ago in the mirror room. To him, this was all just a repeat, nothing new at all. Just then, Popovic appeared and announced that starting next week, Richard would officially integrate into the Academy's school life. This took him by surprise, because at his current level, he had already far surpassed the normal curriculum. Mr. Popovic smiled and acknowledged that. He said, "Your talent is too great. Your learning speed is far beyond our predictions. In fact, 7 months ago, when you created your first original magic, you were already capable of keeping up with the teaching pace. It's just that you were so young, so I kept you back for additional training." Hearing this, Richard looked displeased and suggested he just stay as he was, but Popovic shook his head. "This decision wasn't just mine, it was also the legendary mage's. Returning to a school environment is necessary not just to learn magic, but to develop yourself as a person." Richard frowned, his annoyance clear on his face. "So it's another decision from that legendary mage. But this whole time I haven't even met her once, and yet she's supposed to be my mentor." Popovic placed a hand on his shoulder, affirming it with certainty. He then smiled confidently and said that becoming her disciple was a rare opportunity, and that Richard should feel lucky. "Every arrangement is for your benefit, and it's all under her control." But Richard was not convinced. He turned and walked away, his mind filled with nothing but frustration. He felt like he was being manipulated without learning anything new. He might as well go to the library. That would be more useful. He hadn't gotten far when someone called out to him. Richard turned around, his face still etched with boredom. Before he could even process what was happening, Papin rushed forward and threw a punch straight at his face without any hesitation, knocking him backward. The students on the upper floor immediately erupted into chaos, cheering that a fight had broken out. Papin stood there, his expression aggressive, his voice full of anger, yelling that Richard was a fraud. He accused him of pretending to a title he didn't deserve. Richard sat up, holding his head. Before he could even react, Papin continued to mock him about being the legendary mage's disciple, causing an even bigger stir among the onlookers. Liliana rushed over and whispered to Tiana that Papin was actually a level 2 mage. He has real talent, but was always rejected as a disciple by the legendary mage, so he's always held a grudge. He's been holding it in all day. He must have reached his limit. Up above, Vandal's name was also called. He casually admitted that he had intentionally spread the rumor to provoke Papin, wanting to see what Richard was really made of, even though Minnie warned them not to go too far, or something serious would happen down below. Papin grabbed Richard by the collar, pulled him up, and tauntingly asked if he was scared. He then tried to force him to admit his status, but in that very moment, Richard's eyes suddenly changed. A memory surfaced, an image of him training like a madman for half a year under Popovic's tutelage, from striking wooden posts to build his stamina, to the grueling training regimens designed to turn his body into a vessel strong enough for magic. He gritted his teeth and endured every punch, every drop of sweat, all just to become stronger. Back in the present, Richard was no longer the weak kid who could be pushed around. His expression cold, he reached out and grabbed Papin's wrist, squeezing so tightly that his opponent's face instantly paled. Crying out in pain before he could even react, Richard threw an incredibly fast backhand punch that sent Papin flying. The entire crowd was instantly stunned. Liliana and Tiana's eyes widened in amazement. Even Pandon couldn't believe what he had just seen. Richard pulled his hand back, his eyes calm but frigid, and said just one short sentence, "You're the weak one." Lying on the ground, Papin gritted his teeth in fury. People immediately rushed over to check on him, but his anger had already exploded. Papin slammed his hand on the ground, yelling that he was a level 2 mage. He then immediately cast a fireball spell. The surrounding air grew intensely hot, but Richard just glanced over and raised his hand. A far more violent surge of magical energy erupted, and a brilliant light illuminated the entire area. The surrounding students realized in horror that this was no ordinary magic. Immediately after, a level 3 firestorm slammed straight toward Papin, its power completely overwhelming. The firestorm spell, a level 3 magic, is built upon the foundation of standard fire system magic. By fusing it with the wind element, the flames form a wide area attack that can also create a defensive barrier. Instantaneous tracing rate 87%. Magical power increased by 87%. Indeed, compared to slowly tracing a magic formation where the margin of error can be as low as 0.01% with his current abilities activating and drawing a magic circle in such a short time, the tracing rate can only reach about 80%. Even if I use my true sight ability, someone said from an upper floor, the instantaneous tracing rate is only 87%. So how could that level 3 spell crack a stone wall? That's not the power of a normal spell. The power multiplier from the magic circle's tracing rates must be enormous. That kid, 8, is just a newly enrolled level 1 magic apprentice. Huh, Richard thought, dazed. I can already use level 3 magic, as expected of a legendary mage's student. I got a little carried away and forgot myself. Everyone was whispering amongst themselves. It was rare to have a chance to apply the magic we'd learned for almost a year in a real situation. Teacher Popovic had warned me. Don't carelessly use magic that's above your level, Pandon exclaimed. His power is on a completely different level from ordinary students like us. He then threw a magic schema down to Papin. It's mainly because he's still so young. Papin doubtfully reached out to take it. Here, Papin. Pandon's lips curled into a smirk. Take this. Someone shouted, Papin, don't forget the deal we made. After this is done, I'll use my family's influence to help you become a student of the legendary mage. All the students started running in a panic. Get out of here, quick. Hey, that's Papin. Has that guy gone insane? He's using a magic schema. Recklessly using magic in the school is forbidden. This magical wave is... It's not simple. Run quickly. This isn't a place for kids like you. Richard stood frozen, surrounded by a purple aura. His eyes widened in horror, his pupils contracting. Level 5 magic. He was lifted into the air by the force, crying out in pain. Ah. Liliana's face turned pale. That's level 5 magic. A basic divine power system spell. How can Papin possibly use it? He gritted his teeth, his face contorted in agony. This spell is... Hey, from the legendary mage's magic system. Richard's face was contorted in pain, sweat pouring down like rain. Vandal stood on the sidelines, a wicked smile on his face. Richard rasped, My entire body. I can't move. I'm completely unable to deploy a magic circle to counterattack. And that ear-splitting sound. My head feels like it's splitting apart. Papin said to Pandon, This is enough, isn't it? Let's just teach the kid a lesson. Pandon replied, No rush. Let's wait a little longer. The other boy said worriedly, But I'm afraid he'll go insane. Bandon flashed a malicious smile. I said we wait. I want to see what else that little brat has got. Making him go insane wouldn't be so bad either. Richard's face was twisted in agony, his eyes clenched shut as veins pulsed on his forehead. No, no, no! He frowned, his eyes snapping open, pupils constricting. No! Suddenly a dark aura erupted from Richard. Papin stared in shock as the black energy surged toward him. What is this? The dark aura enveloped him. What kind of power is this? The black smoke vanished. Papin clutched his head, screaming in agony. Ah! He writhed on the ground. Oh, my head hurts so much. A classmate approached and asked, Papin, are you all right? The magic instructors rushed over. A student reported an illegal duel using reckless magic here. Papin was clutching his head and rolling back and forth. Ma'am, Papin suddenly went berserk. Richard lay unconscious on the ground. Richard has passed out too. Pandon hurriedly ran down. Why the hell did Papin suddenly go crazy? I was so close to making that kid. The magic circle design lay on the ground. I have to use my magic to get it back. I can't let anyone find out that I was pulling the strings. A pair of feet approached the magic layout paper. Ma'am, I've discovered the design for the magic circle that student Papin used during the duel. The sorceress looked doubtful. Huh, she continued, perhaps this match? Pandon had a look of utter terror on his face as he stared at Mimi. Holding the paper, Mimi glanced at Pandon. So there was another mastermind. so Helen was suspicious. Did that abnormal energy make him go insane? The Spirit Stone replied, that's right. According to student Papin's memories, he was on the verge of going mad. He saw an unusual energy burst from Richard that was messing with his mind. But the strange thing is, none of the other people involved saw this energy. Thinking that student Papin had suddenly gone crazy, she turned. At that moment, I was using my school's psychokinesis magic, this phenomenon. It's very likely that the darkness inside Richard's body took advantage of that psychic magic. The stone replied, I believe that is what happened as well. So Helen looked up. If that's the case, that means Richard has begun to unconsciously use the power of darkness. Popovic, you must watch him closely. He replied, yes, legendary sorceress. Loham and Joel stepped forward. You were the one who handed down Pandon's punishment. How do you think we should handle this now? So Helen leaned back. Do you two have any opinions? Loham spoke up. The one who instigated this incident has already received a severe punishment. Pandon has outstanding talent and is the son of Duke Solam of the Holy Tree Dynasty. Master Cross himself has praised the boy's crafting abilities. I believe we should maintain his status as a student. Joel then said, I believe Duke Solam of the Holy Tree Dynasty. Mom has 2 other talented sons. We could simply abandon Pandon and offer them a self-funded admission spot. That way we could also receive a hefty donation. Sahilin replied, that idea could cover our losses from last season. Loham cut in, that is unacceptable. A student position under your highness, Suhelen, is far too precious. How can it be sold so carelessly? Doing so would mean adding another self-funded student slot. Joel looked at him. Reputation is a problem for the future. Our losses are right in front of us now. I don't want Her Highness Suhelen to have to take on exhausting and arduous missions just to cover our deficit. The two argued. If we have too many official students whose skills don't match their titles, it would be severely detrimental to Her Highness's reputation and that of Deep Greed Tower. It was your idea to let Pandon buy his way into a student spot in the first place. Joel countered, all income and expenses are the foundation of the Deep Greed Magic Tower. I am merely prioritizing the most practical benefits. Suhelen sighed. It's true that a donation would mean Deep Greed Tower wouldn't be in a deficit. Recently, the dragon whelps we were fighting over have all been taken and they're getting farther and farther away. Searching for them once is already exhausting. What both of you say is true. Seeing these useless students every day, that is precisely why they cause so much trouble. Over time, it will truly devalue my students' worth. It seems no matter what I do, it's difficult. Loham and Joel said in unison, So, Your Highness, your decision is... She rubbed her hands together, her eyes gleaming. Of course, I want it all. Suhelen's eyes shone brightly. An adult doesn't choose. Help me think of a way that will satisfy... Both sides, Joel groaned. There goes Her Highness's greed again. Suhelen turned and walked away. Anyway, Pandon was the one who planned this whole thing. I heard that in this duel. The first-level student, Richard, used a third-level magic spell. It seems your teaching has been quite effective, Popovic, he replied. It's only because the boy Richard has such exceptional talent. He's truly an outstanding prospect. She rubbed her chin, reminiscing. Even I couldn't do that when I first started learning magic. Popovic said, there's another reason the child was able to do it. For the past year, he hasn't just been learning magic. His body, his mind, his will, every aspect of his being has supported him in his efforts. Richard once said, my mother sacrificed everything from beginning to end to protect me. She taught me the meaning of becoming a true man. I have to become strong, to have the power to protect the things I want to protect in the future. A small smile played on Suhelen's lips as she looked into the distance with a faraway gaze. The sky was perhaps tinged with gold and warm sunbeams shone down. She looked up at the sky. It seems this Deep Greed master of rune crafting may witness the birth of a saint of crafting. 1 month later, someone came with a message. Richard, a member of your family, is here to visit, and they've brought a lot of gifts. Hearing this, he quickly ran in that direction. The image of Gopton flashed through his mind. It couldn't be him, could it? The door slowly creaked open. Richard froze, staring at the person before him. Huh! Erin turned around, her voice somber. Richard, it's been a while, she added. My dear half-brother. 3 days prior, in the Black Rose Castle, the lights flickered. Gordon held a glass of wine. News from Greed City had arrived. Over the past year, Richard had studied and matured quite a lot there. The deal with that greedy woman is due for another payment. In a few days, Modris has a pursuit mission. You will accompany me this time to settle it. If that's the case, then you can just stay in Greed City. Daisy held her arm hesitantly. My lord, but my mother's illness. I'm afraid she won't last much longer. Her health has been getting weaker recently. I hope I can be by her side in the end. Gordon replied coldly. Your mother is no longer worth wasting any more time on. For the Archimond family, those who have lost their value cannot become a blade. They can only turn to dust. I order you to depart in 2 days. Her face fell as she clenched her teeth. Yes. Gordon stood up and left. As my own flesh and blood. According to the reports, the special abnormality in Richard's body has allowed him to unconsciously touch the power of darkness. I want you to stay by his side. Observe his condition closely for me. Daisy bowed her head. Yes, my lord. He added, bring the child from the fallen noble family we took in with you. That girl should be about Richard's age. She replied, correct, but she has always been in charge of our intelligence work. Gordon looked out at the sky. It doesn't matter. Let her return to her position as part of the family's bloodline. In the future, Richard's growth will prepare him to continue our lineage. 1 year later, the towering city of Greed, solemn and silent. Students chattered amongst themselves. School starts tomorrow. Did you finish your homework? Not yet. Looks like I'll have to pull an all-nighter to finish it. Wearing only a single piece of cloth, she sat on the bed before stepping outside. Today is the start of a new semester again. I don't even know when it happened. But I've already been here for a year. Her hair blew in the wind. Time really flies. To some extent, this place suits me even more than the Black Rose Castle. Richard was also starting his 3rd semester of magic. That kid is about to celebrate his 13th birthday. A maid entered. I'm here, milady. Daisy glanced back. Go prepare a meal for young Master Richard. Today is another health supplement for him. In the dorms of Greed Academy, Richard was doing push-ups preparing for the new semester. Sweat dripped onto the floor. A voice called out, Richard! Miss Daisy is out today, so she asked me to prepare a full meal for you. He looked up. Again. Erin sat down shyly, brushing her hair. Good morning, Master Richard. He remembered. Since a year ago when his half-sister Daisy came to take care of him, Erin would show up once a week. She asked, Young Master, have you been waiting long? The other delicious dishes will be brought out soon. You should eat while it's still hot. Richard looked at this plate of food with disgust. It's always these strange dishes. Erin introduced them. These are the bones of an earthquake Komodo. This is Hatano fish from the deep sea, and there's also warrior's wine from the elite dwarven warriors of the volcanic canyon. Richard picked up his knife and fork. Every time you come, you prepare these bizarre things for me. He glanced at Erin, his brow slightly furrowed. What's even stranger is that this maid always wears such revealing clothing. I have absolutely no idea what's going on. Erin turned to him. Huh. Young Master, why aren't you eating? Is it because my cooking is bad? Richard got flustered. No, it's not that. I just finished exercising, so I don't have an appetite yet. She pushed the plate closer. That won't do. That. Miss Daisy instructed me to make sure the young master eats everything. These are all the main ingredients of a tonic prepared with a special method. If you eat it all, it will enhance your strength and physique. Or, should I feed it to you? Richard blushed. No need, I'll eat it myself. Erin looked at him, her voice softening. Please eat up. It's a famous saying I learned in Greed City. Over the past year. To have the strength of a dragon, you must first have the appetite of a dragon. The high-level mages here all eat a ton. Miss Daisy also. Hissine prepared these ingredients especially for your constitution. My feelings are in here too. I hope you truly enjoy it. She leaned in close. I can use everything I have to serve you, young master. As Richard was eating, his face flushed red, his eyes rolled into the back of his head, and he collapsed backward. So hot. I can't take it anymore. Erin rushed over in a panic. Young master. White smoke billowed from his mouth. So hot. I'm so dizzy. She worried. Oh no. Maybe I added too much of the medicinal herbs. Or maybe after eating these dishes for a whole year, the effects are finally kicking in. The time has come. I have to help him calm down. At that very moment, a humid steam rose, blurring Richard's vision. He slowly opened his eyes, looking around in a daze. He mumbled, After eating that stuff, my head is spinning. Erin spoke. Her voice was gentle. Young master, are you awake? Richard flinched and turned. Why are you here? She replied softly. I'm just taking care of you. The dishes you just had were a specially made medicinal meal. The effect is quite strong, so your body had an intense reaction because it isn't used to it. Richard pushed himself up, feeling hot all over while his head was still spinning. Aaron quickly reached out to support him. "Young master, be careful." He frowned slightly. "I'm fine, just a little dizzy." Aaron shook her head, her tone becoming more serious. "You can't be careless. These medicinal ingredients have been building up for a long time. They've only shown such a strong effect today. You need to rest." She helped him lean against the side of the tub and gently wiped his forehead with a warm cloth. The room grew quiet, filled only with the swirling steam. Aaron spoke slowly. "I used to think that I could only live my life according to the arrangements of others." Richard's eyes fluttered open as he looked at her. She continued, "But I'll remember what you just said." Richard slowly shook his head, his voice weak but clear. "You're not anyone's tool. Everyone has their own path to walk." Hearing that, Aaron's eyes wavered. She bowed her head and whispered, "Thank you." A moment later, Richard couldn't take it anymore. His body went limp and he passed out. Aaron was startled. "Young master—" She quickly caught him and laid him down to rest. Looking at his face, still flushed from the medicinal power, she let out a soft sigh. She remembered the words he had just spoken. Everyone has their own path. Aaron's gaze grew steadier. She smiled faintly and whispered, "I'm Aaron. From today on, I'll take good care of you. Master Richard." The diamonds outside the building continued to spin beautifully. Popovich suddenly spoke up. "What, Richard took the day off?" Stevenson's son quickly replied, "Yes, a servant from Richard's side already informed me." "I heard Richard isn't feeling well," he continued in a low voice. "Just yesterday he was healthy and energetic, completing the exercises I assigned, wanting to be lazy on the very first day of the semester. That kid," Stevenson's son continued, "it seems I won't have the chance to get acquainted with Richard today." Popovich suddenly remembered something. "Ah, there's no other way. I was planning to have everyone meet beforehand. You're all new students selected by the legendary mage. We'll just have to wait for another time for you to get properly acquainted. For now, I'll take you to the mirror classroom first." Immediately, Randolph came to Stevenson's son's mind. He smiled and continued, "What a shame. I wanted to apologize for what my older brother Randolph did last time. My foolish brother did such a thing, bringing shame to our family." The other students immediately looked up at the sky. "Look at the symbol on that student's emblem. He's from the Sorum family. I heard that this new semester, another student from elsewhere has become a new student of the legendary mage. It's highly likely him." Popovich spoke in a low voice. "It's fine. Richard isn't one to hold a grudge. I think after a whole year he must have forgotten about it by now." Stevenson quickly added, "I've also heard about Richard's achievements, a level 1 student who can already use level 3 magic. He's truly brilliant. I heard that last semester he also had the highest score in magical structure in the entire course. Both Instructor Popovich and Her Highness the Legendary Mage have great faith that Richard will become a rune artificer in the future." He suddenly interrupted. "Not just a rune artificer. Her Highness even has high hopes that one day Richard will become—" Popovich's tone was slightly proud. "A saint artificer. I've heard that your magical talent is also quite high, Master Stevenson's son. In the future, you two might create some sparks in your collaborative work as artificers." His tone remained very casual. "Unfortunately, I'm not like my brother. He desperately wanted to become an outstanding artificer, and that eventually bred jealousy. It seems my talents have nothing to do with being an artificer, but that doesn't affect my eagerness to meet Richard, someone who has received such favor from Her Highness." Just then in the central library, Thalam Jole hurriedly said aloud, "Your Highness, the guest has been waiting for a long time." Days spoke respectfully. "Your Highness Helen, I am here on behalf of the Archimond family to finalize this month's transaction contract." Jale looked up. "Your Highness!" Besides the guest for the transaction, there's also news from the mirror classroom. Duke Sorum's son has arrived and is awaiting an audience with you. Helen abruptly replied, "I'm busy. Tell them to wait a bit longer." He spoke with a bit of impatience. "We've already kept Sorum's son waiting for 3 hours. My sincerest apologies, Your Highness. Sometimes when she's engrossed in something, she gets like this." Days slowly shook her head. "It's all right. I haven't been waiting long." From above, Sue Helen suddenly spoke up. "Oh, Gordon's daughter." Days down below was startled by these words. A book suddenly fell from above. "Take this." Daz quickly raised her arm. "This is—" So Helen looked down with a mischievous smile. Go back and tell Gordon. And not to use his insane values to carry out his schemes of extending his bloodline. Richard is my student now. During the golden period of his training and growth, he cannot have too many other distractions. This is compensation for his disrespect towards me. This month's contract fee is increased by an additional 20%. The thick book was now in Dice's hands. She hesitated slightly, looking up. How did you know? Her lips curved into a smile. I've known about this for a long time. I was just curious to see what effect all those fine delicacies would have on Richard. In Thalam, don't think you can hide anything from me. Let's go. Let's go meet the new student I just acquired. Let me make a hefty profit from this new disciple of mine. Jaylee let out a slow sigh. I was wondering what could possibly be so important that you would risk offending Duke Soram. To think Her Highness would value it this much. Suhilan excitedly continued, Still Little Hui's method is better. Just choose one of Soram's 2 remaining sons to replace Randolph. We get new tuition fees, and we can use Randolph's troublemaking as an excuse to extort a huge amount of compensation from them. At that moment in the mirror classroom, Stevenson quickly spoke up. The unique traditional magic of this mirror classroom. This is truly my first time witnessing it. It's really made me dizzy and my vision is blurry. It's terrifying. When Randolph came here on his first day, he described being just as terrified. I am Stevenson and he is Randolph. Although we are biological brothers and look somewhat alike, our personalities are completely different. As for me, from my brother, I've often heard stories about you, Miss Minnie. You're also a student of the legendary mage from the Marquis Neo family. She rested her chin on her hand, her tone cold. Don't use that condescending tone with me, and I don't care how your brother usually described me. He quickly added that although I am younger than my brother, my mind is much more mature than his. Minnie's eyes were still incredibly sharp. I had also heard, that among Duke Soram's sons, there is one who seems to be a dragon vein sorcerer. Though exceedingly rare, it is one of the most advanced and rarest branches in the world of sorcery. Don't tell me it's you, Stevenson continued with a smile. Seeing as Lady Minnie understands me now, I'll be direct. From our very first meeting, the Neo-Marquisate and the Soram family are currently the most mutually beneficial choice. Let's restart what my foolish brother ruined. Miss Minnie, you and I shall have a new marriage contract. The conversation between the two of them continued in the classroom. Minnie sounded a bit surprised. A marriage contract? You must be joking. We've only just met for the first time. The information our two families have on each other is limited. We can't be said to truly know one another. Not to mention whether we like each other or not. Don't you think saying something like that is too abrupt? Stevenson slowly bowed his head. Beautiful Miss Minnie, as a direct descendant of an illustrious family. You must understand that a family's marriage requires benefits, not feelings of like or dislike. Her voice deepened as she replied, I'm sick and tired of hearing these lectures about family interests coming first. Ever since your brother Randolph proposed to me over a year ago. Are all you young masters from Duke Soram's house this boring? He chuckled and continued. We are both children of noble families. I just wanted to compare notes with Miss Minnie, that's all. I am not a disagreeable person. You can consider my proposal carefully. There's no need to rush into a decision. We have plenty of time. After all, the greatest strength of mages like us is our rationality and calmness. Minnie's gaze narrowed, unable to say another word. Stevenson suddenly took her hand. Sometimes because of that, we are misunderstood as being uninteresting. If my words just now offended you, I hope Miss Minnie can forgive me. In the future, I will use my sincerity to apologize to you. The cold expression on her face remained unchanged. Sir Helen suddenly spoke loudly. Sweet words are the cheapest gift of all. People who truly care have always spoken with money. Stevenson and Minnie quickly stood up and bowed to her. Sir Helen smirked and continued, A dragon vein warlock, huh? Not bad. A very rare talent indeed. Stevenson slowly bowed. Thank you for the praise, Your Highness, the legendary mage. Sir Helen continued. However, the number of dragons I've bullied out in the world is countless. Over time, I've developed a bit of an intimidating aura towards dragons. A person with dragon bloodline like you must feel rather uncomfortable around me, right? He smiled. The fact that the legendary mage was willing to grant an extra spot to the Soram family is already immensely valuable. The influence from my family's bloodline is negligible. Sir Helen nodded. Is that so? If there's any discomfort, just let me know. After all, the Soram family didn't just pay half the agreed-upon amount, but the entire sponsorship fee. Stevenson thought to himself just how many dragons had to die at this woman's hands for her to form such a powerful reverse dragon's aura to be able to become your highness's student, or is already a great honor for me. A smile touched Sahelin's lips. How has Soram been lately? Has he ascended to the legendary rank yet? He quickly replied, my father successfully advanced to the legendary realm late last year. She was surprised. Oh, in that case, I should congratulate him. What is his class specialization? Stevenson replied solemnly, it is the Shadowbane Warrior, your highness. System explanation, Shadowbane Warrior. Sahelin quickly continued, a martial class possessing both a powerful physique and dark power with a strong resistance to all types of magic. Stevenson slowly bowed his head. Their closing speed is extremely fast, the bane of all mages. Her tone was slightly sarcastic. So it's a Shadowbane Warrior, is it? And I thought he would choose the martial saint, which suits him best. That's right. Is this the final choice of that Soram guy's father? It seems that painful beating from all those years ago really left him with some psychological trauma. Popovich continued. How interesting. It looks like on this trip, I'll have to make time to visit my old friend, your father, Sahelin said in a low voice. Stephen's son, you are my student now. But I have other matters to attend to at the moment and don't have time to teach you. Popovic, their future arrangements are all up to you. He replied, leave it to me, your highness, the legendary sorcerer. She smiled and continued. This time, the higher-ups have arranged a very tight schedule, so I'm afraid it will take quite some time. I was originally planning to use this opportunity to meet my new student, to have a proper first meeting with Richard. Popovic interjected, who would have thought that kid would get sick? She shook her head wearily. There's really nothing to be done about it. For this new school year, Popovic continued to monitor his situation closely for me. At this point, Stevenson seemed unable to say another word. He quickly nodded. Please rest assured, your highness. I will make sure he is well taken care of. If anything happens, report to me immediately. A week passed and autumn quietly arrived. At that moment, in a very quiet building, Richard was carefully writing in a book. He thought to himself, as for Minnie and Stephen's son, just go ahead and enjoy your lives. At the Magic Academy. Yes, your highness. System notification diameter 76. Center has one closed loop bypass group, a total of 2 to 3 loops. Radiating lines 12 to 15, curved lines and zigzag lines 8 to 10. Core pattern area approximately 20 to 25%. Radiating area occupies 75 to 80%. Richard mused, the new semester has added so many new subjects recently. The time I have for creating magic circles is getting shorter and shorter. Use True Vision to analyze all data of the inherited magic diagram. System notification. Body measurement 36. Richard was surprised. 36? Aaron suddenly spoke up. The food is here, young master. Richard's cheeks suddenly flushed red. What the hell kind of true vision is this? Aaron's eyes widened. Young master, are you feeling unwell somewhere? You've just been muttering a bunch of numbers to yourself. Richard replied awkwardly, It's nothing. So what's on the menu today? He looked at the food on the table in surprise. Is this normal food? Aaron leaned in and whispered in his ear. The young miss said, from now on, there's no need to feed young Master Richard so many nourishing supplements. She's afraid you won't be able to handle it like last time. Richard quickly turned his head away. That was obviously because you added too much stuff last week. She smiled. If the young master needs it, I can still adjust it again. He quickly shook his head. This is enough. There's no need. She adjusted her collar. I've done as you asked, young master. I'm wearing a more modest outfit, Richard said awkwardly. That's not what I meant. You can't just run around outside dressed like that, can you? Erin furrowed her brow and continued, Of course not. I only wear this outfit when I'm taking care of you, young master. He became flustered. All right, fine. I need to finish my meal quickly. I still have a lot of homework to do. She slowly tilted her head. Actually, young master, I also know a little about magic. Would you like me to help you with some of it? Richard looked over at her. You've studied magic before. Erin's tone was a bit confident. Before coming here, I already had a solid foundation. Plus, I've had a year of study here. In my free time, I also take enrichment courses. System notification. Body temperature 36.7, magic level near level 3. Richard couldn't help but be surprised. She has a magic level close to 3, Erin continued. Not only that, I'm also quite good at gathering information. To understand you better, I've looked into your surroundings. Even though you don't have many friends, this information is still necessary. especially the students who interact with you regularly. Did you know the largest family behind them is—" Richard quickly interrupted. "Oh, right, I heard from Teacher Popovic that the opening ceremony last week was supposed to be a gathering for the legendary sorcerer's students. I didn't go because I was sick. I heard there was a new student accepted named Stevenson. Since he's an outsider who came to study magic, Teacher Popovic arranged for him to study elsewhere. I've never met him, so I'm quite curious about what kind of person he is. I heard his family's bloodline is also very special. Do you have a way to help me investigate and find out more about him?" Hearing this, Erin's eyes suddenly lit up. She held out her hand. 1 gold coin. Richard was surprised. "Huh." Erin lowered her head and smiled. "The fee for intelligence gathering. This is the principle of an intelligence agent." Just then, the hands of the giant clock were still moving. Erin hurriedly ran outside. "I'm screwed. I was serving young Master Richard today and almost forgot the time. It's almost dark. I'm about to be late." Suddenly, she bumped into someone on the street. "Sorry." Stephen's son spoke up. "Wait." He continued in a low voice. "You're Erin, aren't you?" She turned her head. "Huh." Erin glared. "How do you know me?" Stephen. Son replied. "Not only that, I also know your identity." His tone was slightly mocking. Richard's personal attendant. The evening sunset spread across the sky. Erin kept trying to run faster, her footsteps pounding on the long flight of stairs. The image of Stephen's son kept replaying in her mind. She thought to herself, that man is not simple at all. The feeling of being seen through made her more vigilant than ever. Erin thought about how she'd been blocked on her way back. The only way is to use the teleportation circle, even if it means spending this gold coin. Her gaze fell on the palm of her hand, her expression gradually darkening. Just then, a flash of light erupted in front of her. Stephen's son appeared again. "Miss Erin, are you really willing to use teleportation just to avoid me? For someone of your status, that's not a small price to pay." Stephen's son spoke reassuringly. "There's no need to be afraid, Erin. I won't harm you this time. I just want to talk and make a deal." He tossed a bag of money over. "There are 200 gold coins in here." His figure was hidden in the shadows. "I haven't introduced myself yet. I'm Stephen's son, one of the heirs to the Soram family. I'm sure you haven't forgotten that name." He stared at her intently. "In the past records, our family was once connected to your identity, so I think we should speak more clearly." Erin remained silent, her eyes full of vigilance. Stephen continued. "I've investigated your situation quite thoroughly, but what surprises me is that the Archimond family keeps you by Richard's side. What's more, the two of you seem to have a rather close relationship." He smirked slightly. "For someone with your background to be caught up in the schemes of the great families, it's certainly not simple." Erin frowned. "Let go of me." Stephen's son raised his hands, signaling he meant no harm. "I already told you. I don't want to harm you. This gold is just an initial show of good faith. If you agree to cooperate, you can completely escape your current status and have a better position in the future." Erin looked at the bag of money, then back at him. "What do you want?" Stephen's son replied. "It's very simple. Stand with me. Become my supporter. With your abilities, that shouldn't be difficult. And in return, you'll have the freedom and status you deserve." He spoke slowly, as if applying psychological pressure step by step. "Isn't this what you've always wanted?" Just then, a barrier suddenly appeared in midair, knocking his hand away. Stephen was startled. "Who's there?" Minnie's cold voice rang out. "It seems you people from the Soram family still have such an unpleasant way of doing things." Stephen looked over. "I didn't expect you to show up here." Minnie replied, "I was just passing by. I didn't expect to see this." He calmed down. "You're misunderstanding. I'm just proposing a deal." Minnie glanced at Erin, then at him. "The way you do things doesn't look much like a deal." Stephen smiled slightly. "Fine. Then let me be blunt. This is related to Richard Archimond." Minnie's expression changed instantly when she heard that name. Stephen continued. "I believe you know what I mean. Over the past year, the Neo family's situation hasn't been easy either. Your territory is under threat, and the opposing forces are growing stronger. And the person leading that side is Viscount Alizi Archimond. If this conflict continues, I'm afraid it won't be long before Richard's father, Marquis Gordon Archimond, gets directly involved. When that happens, even with our Soram family's support, it will be very difficult to turn the situation around." Old memories suddenly flooded back, causing Minnie to waver for a moment. Stephen continued. "I understand. A year ago you exposed my brother to remove the Soram family's influence from Tamlum. If it were me, I would have done the same. That just proves that you and I are both calculating people. Therefore, at this moment, you must also understand which choice is the most beneficial. If you miss this opportunity, not only will the marriage alliance between our two families become meaningless, but I'm afraid the Neo family will also lose its power in the future. By then, he paused for a beat, then continued, you and Aaron won't be much different. Those words made the atmosphere heavy. Minnie clenched her fists, but didn't reply. 1 month later at the academy, the students were buzzing. The results of the monthly exam are out. Some were too nervous to look. These results directly affect their future mage rankings. Then everyone's eyes turned to the ranking board. As expected, Richard was still at the top. Someone couldn't believe it. Did he cheat? How can he be that good? Someone else immediately retorted, the instructor already said so. He already has the skills of a third-level mage, plus he's the student of a legendary mage. It's not strange for him to be at the top. Dace walked over with a smile. Congratulations, Richard. You're first place again. Richard simply replied, it's nothing. Then suddenly asked, say I haven't seen Erin around lately. Where could she have gone? She thought for a moment before answering. Erin said she wasn't feeling well, so she requested a leave of absence. The higher-ups reported it to Gordon. Right now your studies are the priority, so it's fine to let her rest a bit longer. As for where she went specifically, I'm not sure either. But even without Erin, your daily life will be fully taken care of. Hearing this, Richard fell silent for a moment, his gaze lowering slightly. He looked up at the sky, a sudden sense of emptiness welling up inside him. At Thumb Lam, besides Popovich, the only person who made him feel at ease was, it seemed, Erin. He murmured softly, where did you go? A thought he couldn't quite name flickered through his mind as if something familiar he'd never noticed before was now missing. The castle appeared in its ancient, magnificent splendor. Stepping inside the classroom was already filled with the enchanting lecture of the master painter. He began to speak about the statue of Venus, the immortal symbol of ancient sculpture. A piece where beauty lies not only in its form, but in the perfect balance of every proportion. According to him, the statue's body adheres to the standards revered by the ancients. From the ratio of the head to the body, the shoulders to the waist, to the length of the limbs, everything achieves a near absolute harmony. This is the law of contrapposto, a body that is full, but not at all heavy. It is soft, while still maintaining a sense of dignity, representing the aesthetic ideal pursued by the ancient Greeks. He went on to emphasize that the beauty of Venus comes not only from its perfection, but also from its very imperfection. The long-lost arms inadvertently open up a boundless space for imagination, keeping the work alive through the centuries. However, just as the entire class was engrossed in the lecture, Richard was completely lost in thought. He was pulled from his reverie when the master painter suddenly called his name. His voice carried a hint of sarcasm. He had clearly noticed the boy's inattentiveness. Under the pressure of the entire class's gaze, Richard was a bit flustered, but he still stood up and admitted he had been distracted. At the same time, he explained that he already had a certain understanding of this statue. A buzz immediately went through the classroom. Some were curious, others were quietly skeptical. But right after Richard began his presentation, he spoke of the statue's height, about 2 meters. He described how it was constructed from 2 blocks of marble with the joint hidden between the torso and the wrapped cloth, then analyzed the head-to-body ratio, which nearly reached the ideal standard according to the canon of Polykleitos. All of it showed that this was the complete model of classical aesthetics. In class that day, while everyone was still struggling with abstract aesthetic concepts, Richard left the entire class stunned. He didn't just understand, he analyzed the statue in extreme detail. From how the body was divided according to the golden ratio with the navel as the perfect dividing point, to how the entire form was organized into 3 balanced parts like a law of near absolute visual harmony. And he didn't stop there. Richard also pointed out the statue's living quality. The soft S-curve, the weight shifted to one side, the slight turn of the body creating a feeling that was both graceful and stable. It all came together into a beauty so balanced it was nearly perfect. The entire class was dead silent. Some even had their mouths agape in astonishment. Even the master painter couldn't hide his surprise. He candidly admitted that what Richard said was even more profound than his own lecture. A rare compliment rang out in the classroom, followed by both admiration and resentful glares. Because everyone could see one thing: this kid was too brilliant. So brilliant it made others uncomfortable. He was outstanding beyond his years, and because of that, for the past year, almost no one had genuinely wanted to get close to him. But at that moment, Richard paid no mind to the other's stares. In his head, there was only one person. Images of Aaron appeared again and again, from their first meeting to the weekends when she quietly prepared his meals or the times she gently offered to help him relax after tiring days of study. A person who once said she wanted to be his friend. The more he remembered, the heavier his heart became. By the time class ended, he was still sitting numbly in the library, unable to read a single word. Time slipped by unnoticed until he was reminded that he had to leave. Night fell and the space became so quiet it was a little creepy. Then suddenly footsteps rang out. Richard immediately became alert. It was long past curfew. No one should have been there. Just then the system in his head responded. A series of familiar parameters appeared. Height, build, a nearly absolute level of similarity. In an instant, Richard's eyes flew open. It was Erin. Without a second thought, he immediately chased after her, calling her name, trying to get her to stop. But Erin turned and ran as if she were avoiding him. Left with no choice, Richard was forced to act. A low-level spell was activated just enough to stop her in her tracks. Erin fell, and he rushed forward, grabbing her firmly. His voice was a mixture of urgency and worry. "You disappeared for a whole month without a single word of explanation." He couldn't understand what was happening, but Erin's reaction was the complete opposite. Cold and distant, she brushed his hand away, demanding he let go of her as if there had never been any closeness between them. At that moment, Richard realized something was wrong. The bruise on her neck, her abnormal heartbeat, her eyes filled with suppressed emotions, she was clearly enduring something. His expression immediately changed, his voice growing harsher as he pressed her for the truth. But Erin only replied with a single sentence, "This is my choice." She needed money. She wanted to escape her current status. Richard could barely contain himself anymore. He said he could help, that even his family could help. But Erin just shook her head slightly, her gaze both calm and pained, and her unfinished sentence, "I don't want to," hung like a silent blade cutting through the atmosphere. The story opens late one evening when Erin suddenly speaks up, demanding her money back from Richard. Before the tension could subside, another person interjected curiously, asking why Richard was at the dormitory at this hour. It didn't stop there. Stevenson immediately seized the opportunity, trying to act friendly, both flattering Richard and trying to strike up a conversation, claiming that he too was the student of a legendary mage. But before he could finish his introduction, Richard coldly brushed his hand away, cutting him off. Without a hint of hesitation, he turned and walked away. He left only a brief apology, saying he wasn't in the mood. Stevenson refused to let it go, uttering a cryptic phrase that one day Richard would be desperate to know his name. Outside, night had fallen. A crescent moon hung in the sky. In the deserted academy grounds, Richard walked silently and alone, his lonely shadow stretching out on the path. In his heart right now wasn't peace, but a simmering rage. The question, "Who was it?" repeated over and over in his head. His fists clenched and dark energy began to spread as if reflecting his rising anger. He shot up, and in the blink of an eye he was gone, darting into the night so fast that birds scattered in a panic. He had only one thought on his mind. "I have to find them." The next morning the academy returned to its usual bustling self. But amid the noise, Richard sat alone in a corner, his eyes heavy with thought. The memory of last night was crystal clear. The image of the girl coming down from the dormitory area replayed in his mind. Without hesitation, Richard began to walk around, hands in his pockets, his eyes scanning every nook and cranny. As if searching for the final trace, he stopped in front of a tall building, his gaze becoming certain. He believed that the person he was looking for was definitely somewhere among the students of this academy. Just then Popovic appeared, not forgetting to tease him for not having seen him in a while. But this time Richard didn't beat around the bush, asking directly about something special, a travel pass to Sunset Port. Hearing this, Popovic's tone immediately became serious. He spoke of the place as a land full of shadows, where dirty dealings and outlaws thrived. It was no place for a student. Richard remained adamant, explaining that his magical research required him to go there. But even though he understood the reason, Popovic couldn't agree. As his instructor, he had to ensure his students' safety. Hearing this, Richard could only bow his head, accepting that his request was perhaps too much. However, just as he was about to leave, Popovic made him stop with another remark. If he couldn't help as a teacher, he could still offer a suggestion as to whom Richard should seek out. The new art instructor, a mysterious master painter. Hearing this, Richard saw a glimmer of hope. He immediately understood, bowed his head in thanks, and left. He began to plan his approach, but before he got far, Popovic's reminder echoed from behind him. At this academy, everything is under control, and no one is allowed to cross the line, not even the student of a legendary sorcerer. Those words made Richard pensive. The master painter. Perhaps the key lay there. And to approach this person, the only thing that could create a connection was a sincere work of art. The scene shifts to the art class. The master painter announced the end of the session, asking students to submit their drawings. The theme was, "The Woman in Your Heart." Outwardly, he was gentle, but inwardly, he was full of despair. To him, teaching a bunch of students who only knew magic, and understood nothing about art, was nothing short of a waste of his life. If it weren't for a bet with His Highness that left him with a colossal debt, he probably would have never set foot here. As he began to look through the students' drawings, his fatigue became even more apparent. One piece after another, they all made him want to clutch his head. In the end, the master painter could only slap his forehead. He felt like his head was spinning, not because of the art, but because he couldn't stand it anymore. The teacher picked up a painting and froze the moment he saw it, his eyes wide with astonishment. Because this style was completely unlike anything they had ever known in their world. The sharp lines, the delicate emotions. It was as if it carried a soul of its own. He mumbled, "I can't believe it. This is the work of the top student of the year." He even blurted out Richard's name in a shocked voice. Just then, a knock on the door broke the atmosphere. He immediately composed himself and called out for them to enter. Richard walked in with an indifferent expression, his gaze distant, asking directly why he had been summoned. The teacher didn't beat around the bush and directly proposed a trade, wanting to keep the painting for his collection. He began to praise the work, describing every detail, like the gentle light covering the maiden in the painting, every soft line both pure and tinged with a wistful sadness, as if it held an untold story. The more he spoke, the more his passion showed. He even admitted that Richard's talent exceeded his expectations. He wasn't just good at magic, but also possessed an incredible artistic gift. But then his voice lowered, mentioning the condition for the trade, a travel pass to Sunset Port, a place that was far from simple. He implied a warning of the consequences. But Richard didn't waver. He calmly replied that he would bear any consequences himself, and even bluntly pointed out the secret rumors about the trafficking of artworks containing blueprints for forbidden magic. These words made the teacher's expression change instantly. He angrily retorted, denying everything and demanding proof. But Richard only needed to observe his heart rate and reaction to know his guess had hit the mark. He smiled faintly, his voice still calm but carrying an invisible pressure. He mentioned his status as the legendary sorcerer's student and the power of the family behind him, a family famous for its intelligence network, before slowly revealing that the transaction list was already in their hands. At this point, the teacher had completely lost the upper hand. His face changed repeatedly, and in the end, he could only compromise, hastily agreeing to arrange for someone to guide Richard to Sunset Port. His voice carried a mix of reluctance and anxiety, as if he had just been forced into a corner with no way out. Richard didn't back down. On the contrary, he coldly raised the stakes. His decisive tone stunned the teacher. He furiously cursed at him for giving an inch and taking a mile, but Richard held all the cards. He calmly declared this was no longer a simple trade for a painting. The other party was forced to meet his demands. His eyes were sharp, observing every small reaction. The other man's body tensed. He was clearly backed into a corner. And then the demand was made. He wanted to use the underground connections at Sunset Port to find someone who could teach him assassination skills, a request that immediately made the air heavy. 2 days later, at the teleportation point of Sunset Port, Richard appeared alone in the middle of the night in a place known as the Land of Sin and Shady Dealings. A wizard looked at him with a scrutinizing gaze, unable to hide his surprise at the audacity of a teenager who dared to step into this place. Richard simply remained silent, presented the travel pass, and asked to be guided. From there, he was drawn into a completely different world, where dark alleys teemed with outlaws. Scrutinizing glares, suggestive offers, it all created a suffocating and dangerous atmosphere. Finally, he was led to meet Nia, the woman behind the underground transactions. With just one look, she could tell Richard was no ordinary person. To dare to come here to learn how to kill while remaining so calm, that was enough to get her attention. Some time passed. 1 month later, in the gloomy space of the underground training area, Richard had grown accustomed to this place. Despite being surrounded by dangerous and chaotic people, he maintained a cold expression focused on his goal. Until an unexpected moment occurred. His gaze froze when he saw the very painting he had once drawn placed on a delivery cart, like an item for trade, making the world seem to spin before his eyes. But he quickly suppressed his emotions as the training session ended. Nia tossed him a pouch with his fee, laughing as she challengingly asked if he'd ever considered being killed right here. But Richard just calmly replied that he could read other people's intentions. Besides, every time he came here, he only brought enough money for the day. Killing him would bring no benefit, whereas if they successfully trained him, the returns would be much greater. His sharp reasoning made Nia laugh, but she also began to see him in a different light. Still, she warned that an assassin doesn't just work for money. They also have to weigh the risks, and she had already investigated Richard's identity, a student from the Greed Academy, a place that strictly forbids the use of harmful magic on its grounds. That's precisely why he had to come to a place like this, to learn skills beyond their surveillance. Then she asked him directly, who did he want to kill? Richard didn't answer directly, only saying he didn't know his target yet. But learning here would help him find that person. His words made Nia immediately grow more serious, and it was then that Richard revealed his true purpose. Besides avoiding the Academy's supervision, he was also after something more important. The special reconnaissance technique used by professional assassins, an ability to track the traces of their prey. And that very thing was the key to achieving his goal. When the teacher finally heard Richard's request, he was stunned, his eyes wide with disbelief. The artificer's reconnaissance technique wasn't something a mere teenager could normally comprehend, let alone want to learn. But Richard replied calmly, as if he had calculated this all along. He believed that with the great painter's extensive connections across the continent, finding a suitable person wouldn't be difficult. His words were soft, but they sent a cold sweat down the other man's back, because he wasn't just talking. He knew the man's past very well. From being an honored guest of imperial royalty to having associated with countless famous artificers. The atmosphere grew tense as Richard continued his analysis. In the world of magic, artificers are those who can create miracles, the pillars of legendary power. But at the same time, they are also a massive threat to the ruling powers. If they go beyond control, they could easily become a factor in a nation's destruction. That's why all factions seek to control, recruit, and exploit them. From that, countless branches of power centered around artificers were born, from legions of artificer knights to specialized assassination organizations. Each branch wields terrifying power, enough to turn the tide of war. Hearing this, the teacher was even more shaken. He realized he could hide nothing from this child. Richard's understanding and intellect were far beyond his years, forcing the man to concede and continue explaining the world of artificers, where legendary weapons and equipment once shaped history, becoming symbols of power for the great factions. But Richard didn't stop there. He bluntly exposed the man's use of art as a cover to smuggle artificer blueprints, turning it into a tool for exchanging favors. His words cut straight to the man's weak spot like a knife. This left the teacher with no choice but to claim it was all to pay off a debt. However, Richard immediately refuted that, stating it was something the Academy absolutely forbade. Cornered, the teacher was finally forced to compromise. He revealed that besides the Artificer Knight forces, another branch exists that specializes in handling secret missions. Those are the assassination organizations, and the reconnaissance technique Richard wanted to learn originated from them. Then he suggested a name, an assassin who had gone into hiding and could teach him. The moment the name was spoken, Richard realized Nia's true identity. But right after he applied more pressure, mentioning how members of assassination organizations often have bounties on their heads, and if word got out, that person's life would surely no longer be peaceful. His words weren't loud, but they were enough for the listener to understand this was no longer a request, but a checkmate that had already been declared, with Richard in complete control. Just as the tension was stretched taut like a bowstring, Nia's voice suddenly cut in, carrying a hint of interest mixed with appraisal. It was clear she saw that Richard was no ordinary person. She even seemed quite impressed. He bluntly raised his payment for their next meeting to 500 gold coins, just in exchange for prioritizing learning the artificer's reconnaissance technique, a sum that would stun an ordinary person, but Nia shook her head, even though she also wanted that money. She told him straight just learning how to draw the diagrams was useless. She had left the organization long ago, and without the runes and foundational materials provided by an artificer, the technique couldn't be used. Her gaze grew sharp and cold, as if testing him, but Richard didn't flinch. He simply replied calmly that she didn't need to worry about that, because sooner or later he would become an artificer. A month later, his efforts finally paid off. The system in his head continuously analyzed the array's structure, from the positioning frame and guiding runes to the trace-linking mechanism. It all gradually perfected into his own version of the reconnaissance technique. Meanwhile, on the outside, Days started to notice unusual changes. Richard was becoming more and more withdrawn. He often disappeared at night and even borrowed a large sum of money, making her suspicious. Until one day an excited voice echoed from within his room. Richard emerged looking exhausted but with eyes shining brightly. He had clearly made a significant breakthrough. Inside his mind, everything was starting to connect after a month of experimentation. By constantly adjusting every detail of the runes, he finally managed to replicate the reconnaissance technique using the target's traces to create a link, turning it into a form of alert. When a related subject appeared, its current effectiveness was only about 50% due to material limitations, but that was enough to prove he was on the right path. And to go further, there was only one path left to officially become an artificer. Immediately after, Richard went to Popovic and made a request that surprised him. He wanted to start on the path of an artificer right away. Even though the regulations required reaching a certain level of magic to be eligible, Richard was very clear. His true abilities had long since surpassed that threshold. He just hadn't had the chance for an official rank-up. He didn't want to waste any more time. His firm words made Popovic fall into deep thought. In the end, he still decided to help writing a letter of recommendation for the boy to the Academy's top Grandmaster of Constructs to participate in the exam, but not without a warning. This exam made no exceptions for anyone. However, Richard surprised him once more. He refused any basic preparation, asserting that his introductory blueprints were already complete. And right after that, he appeared at the registration area amidst a bustling crowd where everyone carried the hope of stepping onto the path of a construct master. Richard, however, quietly observed, until an unexpected warning signal rang in his head. Something he himself had created had reacted. His eyes immediately shot open as he quickly followed the trace. And then amidst a messy pile of items, he recognized something familiar. A trace of Erlen. But what truly made him freeze was the name engraved on the accompanying tag, Stevenson. 2 days later, the entire city seemed to be bathed in the golden hues of autumn. But inside the academy, the air was hotter than ever because of the selection results for the Construct Master Department. They were finally announced. The hallways were packed with students buzzing with discussion. Some were ecstatic for passing, while others were crushed for failing yet another year. There was even someone who had failed for the 7th time. Still, they couldn't let go of hope. The atmosphere was both tense and bitter because everyone understood that the path of a construct master was not for the masses. It was a direct competition. Among the true geniuses of the entire academy amidst that crowd, someone lamented that they were nearly 30 years old and still couldn't satisfy Grand Magus Fim with their test, while another consoled themselves, saying that even some of the senior apprentice mages had failed. As usual, while everyone was still chattering, their gazes were suddenly drawn in one direction as Richard appeared, a second-year student only level 2, daring to step into the registration area. His presence caused the whole crowd to stir with discussion. Some were suspicious of his special privilege thanks to his status as the student of a legendary mage, while others scoffed, thinking that at his level there was no way he could pass the test. Richard paid no mind to their stares. He just quietly held the letter in his hand. When the envelope was opened, a soft light flashed. The message was simple, but enough to change the atmosphere he had passed. He was requested to be present in room number 3 of the teaching building at 3 o'clock in the afternoon to continue his assessment. Richard appeared on time in the quiet yet heavy atmosphere of the construct classroom. Light filtered through the glass windows, creating a somewhat hazy ambiance. Not long after, 2 other figures appeared. One was Stevenson and the other was Minnie. This made Richard freeze for a moment, as he was familiar with both of them. Stevenson spoke first with a composed demeanor, as if they were old acquaintances, while Minnie remained aloof, though she couldn't hide her attentiveness. The atmosphere between the three instantly grew more tense than usual. Only then did Fim slowly explain the situation. The test results this year had exceeded expectations. For the first time in 15 years, 3 people had met the standard, which made Richard pause for a moment. He hadn't expected the list to be so short. But what caught his attention even more was the name Stevenson, the only person from whom he had sensed a trace related to Erlen during the test. When Fim confirmed that all 3 were students of the legendary mage, Richard immediately understood. The connections were overlapping, making everything far more complicated than he had imagined. While he was still lost in thought, Stevenson unexpectedly stepped forward and introduced himself, clearly stating his identity as the youngest son of the Soramu family. His voice was calm, but it carried an indescribable pressure. Richard immediately clenched his fists, a sense of tension rising as memories of Aaron and what had happened began to surface. A killing intent unconsciously radiated from him, cold and heavy enough to make even Stevenson pause for a beat. In that instant, the entire space seemed to fall silent. All that remained was the silent confrontation between the two of them, and a determination slowly forming in Richard's eyes, something that even he couldn't fully control yet. Stevenson suddenly spoke up, calling Minnie's name directly, and asking her to confirm their arranged marriage in front of everyone present. That one sentence was enough to make Minnie's expression visibly darken, growing noticeably colder, as if she'd been thrown into a situation she wasn't prepared for. Grand Magus Fim, who was about to continue announcing the test results, was cut off by her. "Excuse me," Minnie requested. Her voice remained polite, but it clearly carried the intent to seize control of the situation. Then, right after that, she unexpectedly stepped forward. She took Stevenson's hand as a form of public confirmation. She announced the relationship between herself and him, emphasizing that this was an arranged marriage between the Neo family and the Soram family. She even went so far as to invite Fim to attend the engagement ceremony the very next day. This news instantly changed the atmosphere in the room. Fim was also momentarily surprised, but he quickly offered his congratulations, as this was clearly a major event between two great families. Minnie then proactively invited Richard to attend as well, causing his gaze to darken for a moment. He seemed to be reassessing everything that had just happened. Stevenson added on his attitude calm but sharp, stressing that Minnie had agreed to the engagement, and that he considered this a matter of honor between both sides. He then invited everyone to share in their joy. Meanwhile, Richard stood silently for a beat, his mind beginning to reanalyze the entire situation, his speculations about Aaron, about the arcane markings from before, and that initial unusual feeling were all brought back for reconsideration. He told himself he might have been too hasty because, according to the logic of the nobility, a political marriage like this could completely rule out the possibility of either one of them directly harming a low-level slave. At the same time, Fim spoke up, cutting through the gradually intensifying atmosphere. He reminded everyone to return their focus to the test. He stated frankly that all the construct blueprints submitted were merely at an introductory level, but there were still clear differences between each person. And so instead of a normal grading, he would conduct a practical experiment to assess their construct abilities more directly. The moment the word experiment was mentioned, Richard was immediately on guard. Right after that, the space in front of them opened up, magical light spread, and everyone was led to the testing area. Before them was a type of controlled experimental creature. It was used to measure the effectiveness of the construct blueprints. The metrics for reaction speed and transformation after applying the runic enchantments were clearly displayed, turning the entire test into a vivid yet cold-blooded comparison. Richard watched the scene. A feeling of discomfort slowly welled up inside him because what Fim called an experiment was in fact using a living creature to verify their constructs. Minnie was evaluated first. The results showed her construct's effectiveness was decent, but it was still only just over 20% optimized, which made her slightly puzzled as she didn't quite understand why she was ranked lower than she expected. Fim explained that he had based his preliminary assessment on the structure of the blueprints and his prior observational data, and this was how he wanted his students to understand the true nature of constructs. It wasn't just about what was on paper, but it had to be proven through immediate experimentation. Soon after, Stevenson's and Richard's names were called, preparing to enter the next evaluation phase. Stevenson confidently declared that he was using high-grade materials, even premium dragonhide, to guarantee he'd take the top spot. Meanwhile, Richard remained silent, his eyes glued to the entire experimental system in operation. The atmosphere in the room grew as taut as a bowstring as the official testing round began, and everything would have to be revealed by the true results. There was no more room for any speculation. Afterward, Stevenson looked at Richard, his gaze still holding a hint of scrutiny from the last experiment. Then he spoke up as if wanting to confirm something. Richard just shook his head slightly, saying he was fine. He was just a little unsteady on his feet, but inside his head things were far from simple. The runes he had placed on the test subject always had a certain level of response. Even with just a 50% probability, there should have at least been some fluctuation during long-term contact. But this time it was completely blank. There wasn't any familiar signal at all. That feeling made Richard gradually certain of one thing: the person he'd been suspicious of from the start was probably not the one. Across from him, Stevenson also began to notice something unusual in Richard's gaze. His expression flickered, becoming sharper and much more guarded. Just then, a loud voice from the testing grounds announced the results. The time for the 400-meter 5-lap run has been recorded 8 minutes and 4 seconds. Speed increased by over 33%. Minnie frowned slightly upon hearing this. As for Stevenson, he let out a light chuckle, but it was a dissatisfied one. He casually remarked that this result didn't meet his expectations, though it was still acceptable for an initial construct test. But his eyes revealed clear disdain and absolute confidence that he was still superior. At the same time, the system called out Richard's name. The next test subject was brought out. The moment he heard his name, Richard froze his gaze, changing instantly. In front of him was a creature half man and half horse. It was led into the testing area, its eyes cold and emotionless, as if it were used to being treated as a tool. The runic light shone down, and the third test began. Outside, Fim observed the data and calmly remarked, "Richard's construct uses very common beast hide, almost the lowest grade, but its ability to activate acceleration, is achieving stable efficiency not at all inferior to constructs made with higher-grade materials." Hearing this, Stevenson immediately scoffed to himself, believing his materials were far superior. Premium dragon hide can't be compared to that garbage beast hide. He was certain the final victory would still be his. However, when the results were announced, the atmosphere in the room changed instantly. 8 minutes and 5 seconds, a 33% increase in speed. It was almost identical to Stevenson's result. The difference in materials was almost completely negated. Minnie was stunned, and Stevenson couldn't hide his astonishment. He couldn't understand how a construct using such mediocre materials could achieve an efficiency comparable to his dragonhide. Fim finally spoke up to explain. The key isn't the material, but the coordination of the runes and the precision of the construct. Richard compensated for all the material's limitations with his structural technique. This is the true essence of a construct master. That remark silenced Stevenson for a moment while Richard continued to gaze at the test subject, but his gaze had grown more somber. Fim continued his analysis, explaining that while Stevenson's result was slightly better in terms of raw time, his construct caused a side effect. On the test creature, its body was overstimulated, leading to pain and instability. In contrast, Richard's construct, while not perfectly optimized for speed, it maintained a balance between efficiency and safety. This is the true standard of a real construct master. When the final declaration was made, Richard was confirmed as having the most outstanding test in the selection. A circle of light appeared in the space announcing the result, but contrary to the seemingly glorious atmosphere. Behind them, Stevenson and Minnie couldn't maintain their composure. Stevenson gritted his teeth, admitting that their initial plan had been shattered from the very first step and that Richard had already noticed something. It was beyond his expectations. He began to reanalyze the entire situation, from the feeling of being scrutinized to the unusual reactions during the test, and gradually concluded that Richard was not so simple. Not just a simple construct master student. Minnie, standing beside him, also started to worry as the plan involving the political marriage and the subsequent political moves was now in jeopardy. Stevenson finally made a decision. If everything had been discovered earlier than expected, the only option left was to change the entire plan and deal with the problem before it had a chance to spread. Sunset Alley was cloaked in the dim light of night. People passed by like hurried, faceless shadows. Erin moved quickly through the crowd, stopping in front of an old, shabby shop. Then she lowered her voice to speak as if she were all too familiar with this place. The shopkeeper glanced at her and asked bluntly if she had brought enough for the deposit this time. Erin didn't say much. She just placed a large sum of gold on the table, coldly confirming that the deposit was complete, just as agreed. As for the Southern Continent travel passes, they would be paid for in installments as promised. Elsewhere, Stevenson was seething with unconcealed frustration. He couldn't accept that a level 2 student like Richard could create something that surpassed his predictions. He considered his preparations to be perfect, even enlisting the help of a level 7 mage named Minnie and using the best resources. It took him hundreds of experiments just to perfect a 33% rune, and yet his result was still beaten. That made him immediately suspect that Richard couldn't have done it alone. There had to be someone else behind this. That suspicion quickly morphed into killing intent as he turned to Erin, demanding to know if she was hiding something from him, but she could only offer a few meager details about the schedule Daisy had arranged for Richard. After being ordered to cut off contact with him, she no longer had many opportunities to get close. But Stevenson wasn't satisfied. He exploded in anger, dragging her back and pinning her down on the table, stressing her status as a slave and the absolute power he held in his hands. His words were so cold they left Erin to do nothing but endure them silently through her tears, while he declared that she must obey him absolutely if she wanted to trade it for the position and benefits he had promised. As he was leaving, Stevenson suddenly changed his plan. He ordered Erin to continue approaching Richard, but this time it wasn't to hide anything but to tell the truth. That the person she's been in contact with isn't him. At the same time, she is to prepare for another act at a time and place he will arrange. Because in his estimation, Richard was no longer the simple person he once was, and everything needed to be handled with more care. The next morning, warm sunlight poured down on the city. It seemed like everything was back to normal, but behind that light, calculations and schemes had already begun to shift in a completely different direction. Richard stood silently, his eyes glued to the unfinished lines of analysis, much running through his mind. The structure of the June had still not reached the desired state of perfection. Although its composition was nearly a perfect match, its actual performance remained limited. Especially since he could only use common beasts, the entire reconnaissance system couldn't surpass 50% efficiency as required by the theory. He had to admit if he wanted to advance.
Chinese.
The only way was to upgrade the materials. That meant achieving better results in structural research to request access to better resources. In Richard's mind, everything revolved around a single point. His teacher Phim had repeatedly assessed him as far exceeding the level of an ordinary student, even hinting that Richard was hiding something bigger. He thought those words of praise mixed with warnings wouldn't make him more confident. On the contrary, they made him start to doubt himself, especially when Phim had once commented that Richard's practical exercise was too perfect for a level 2 student. Richard had immediately denied it, but the man didn't stop there. He even mentioned His Highness, as if an invisible center was coordinating everything in this academy. A place where all talent was placed within a prearranged system. And then Phim had also said it bluntly at Tham Lam, the profession of a structure engineer was not just academic but a tool of power. It was supported and selected by the entire system. Not everyone with talent got to advance, only those who aligned with the will of those above were truly recognized. But in that moment, the image of Stephen's son appeared in his mind as clear and irritating as a thorn that couldn't be ignored. Even though the Jones had never reacted to him, Richard's intuition still couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Then suddenly his body trembled slightly. The run in his palm reacted more strongly than usual, as if some kind of signal had just been activated. Richard immediately turned his head, his gaze sweeping the area. And in an instant he thought of Erin. Without hesitation, he rushed out the door, calling her name loudly, but the only reply was the emptiness of the hallway. And right before his eyes, a piece of paper had been left silent, as if everything had been arranged beforehand. 3 days passed faster than Erin had thought, yet they felt heavy as if stretched out in the darkness. Stephen's son's instructions for a meeting on the weekend evening, at a time when the fewest people were around, still echoed in her head. He had even forced her to come an hour early, as if everything was prearranged. The location he chose was the west wall leading out of the city, a place so deserted that if anything happened, it would be difficult for anyone to discover it in time. Erin was both worried and annoyed, but she still couldn't refuse. Her sense of unease grew as she couldn't figure out what Stephen's son was planning. Elsewhere, Stephen's son had already begun to implement his plan. He sought out Papin, a man who had been expelled from the Tham Lam Academy after an incident in the past, carrying a long-held grudge and a shattered spirit. To Stephen's son, Papin was just a tool to be exploited, a spark ready to ignite. And Erin, she was just another pawn in his game. As long as he achieved his goal, both could be discarded. That night, Erin was dragged into the very scenario she had feared. In the midst of her panic, she was restrained, her body growing weak. Papin, on the other hand, clearly showed the distorted mindset of someone driven to despair, filled with both hatred and the desire for revenge. He began to talk about the past, about the academy, about what had ruined his life, twisting it all into a dangerous, warped emotion. And just at that moment, Richard appeared. Seeing the scene before him, a murderous aura erupted from him almost uncontrollably. Without a second thought, he lunged straight at Papin. All reason and warnings about the Academy's rules were cast aside. At first, Papin just sneered, thinking Richard wouldn't dare to act. But he was immediately knocked down by a relentless barrage of attacks. Blood began to fly. The air descended into chaos. The more Richard fought, the more he seemed to lose control, with only one thought remaining: to crush the opponent before him. Amidst all that chaos, Erin lay on the ground, weak and terrified, her vision blurring. but she still tried to look toward Richard. Then in that instant, Stephen Sun's words about a play flashed through her mind, and she suddenly realized everything was being pushed along according to a dangerous script that no one could stop. Richard was stunned by the scene before him. He stammered, "Aaron." Aaron was lying amidst the mess, her clothes tattered, looking helpless and weak. Richard, confused, asked, "Why did you save him?" She replied, "This has nothing to do with you, Richard." Stunned, he said, "No!" Then Aaron screamed, "Get out of here!" "It was all my choice." Her eyes welled up with tears, her cheeks flushed. "Do you see now? This is who I really am." Richard was stunned, unable to believe his eyes. "No." Aaron shouted, "Go, go! Attacking someone in the academy is a major offense. If you don't leave now, you'll be caught." Heartbroken, tears falling, he could only grit his teeth. Then Richard stumbled away. Aaron looked down. "I was never yours to begin with." The next day in his room, Stephen Sun said with confusion, "What, no one was injured?" The person opposite him replied, "That's right, young master. Stephen Sun has already confirmed with the Thumlam's magic guard. Last night no signs of a magical battle were detected." Hearing this, he roared in anger, "Impossible! Confirm it again clearly for me!" The other person hurriedly ran off. "Yes, young master, I'll go right away." Stephen Sun was furious, his face twisted in an ugly grimace. "Impossible. My plan can't have failed. I spent a huge sum of money to hire that Papanda man with a grudge against Richard, and used his former status as a Thumlam student and his abilities to have him sneak into the academy, to assault Aaron right in front of Richard to provoke his rage and murderous intent. That Papin is absolutely no match for Richard. If a murder were to happen within the academy, Richard would be finished. He'd be expelled, branded a murderer. I was certain of his killing intent at that moment, and yet he didn't even use magic. Could it be that bastard used some other trick? Suddenly, Minnie, standing by the window, spoke up. "Women aren't so easily controlled, you know." He glanced at Minnie. "What did you say?" She said, "A plan that relies on that woman." "I had no faith in it at all. Don't be so overconfident in your own abilities." Stephen Sun was speechless. Minnie, take this cursed construct and go. I've already dispatched the assassin. The target is Archimond Richard. He told me to tell you, Miss Dragon, not to get too clever. Don't forget that in Thumlam no one can commit murder without being discovered. If the assassin is caught and rats us out—" Suddenly, Minnie cut him off. "Who said I was going to kill him?" Stephen Sun was stunned. "Huh." She glanced down at the piece of dragon skin marked with a strange symbol. "What I want is his blood, as a conduit for the runes of the cursed construct." Two students chatted happily. "Wait for me to get back to the dorm and drop off my books. Let's meet at the gym." "All right, see you upstairs later." Suddenly, an angry voice rang out. "You can't skip class anymore," Minnie continued. "You've already skipped for 3 days in a row. Continuing to be absent without a valid reason will only lead to disciplinary action from the school. For Richard, who has always had excellent academic performance, receiving disciplinary action will have a very negative impact on his future mage-level scores. On top of that, Richard is the student of a legendary mage, so this will greatly affect his future." Days replied helplessly, "I understand, it's just—" She recalled the maid's words, "Young Master Richard, please open the door. He hasn't let me bring food in for 3 days. Des explained, confused. "Richard, he's locked himself in his room and won't see anyone. We have no idea what happened to him 3 nights ago." Inside the dark room, everything was a mess with things thrown about. Richard sat huddled in a corner. He looked at his trembling hands as the scene from that night replayed clearly in his mind. "That was close!" Richard panted, his hands trembling and his clothes disheveled. In his mind right now was the feeling of killing someone. Suddenly, the image of Aaron in pain and being toyed with by those thugs flashed before his eyes. Richard was haunted by the horror of it. "Aaron, she—" Instantly, his entire body began to shake. Suddenly, the sound of breaking glass echoed. Something was thrown into Richard's room. He sat up, stunned, looking at the object. A strange glowing circle appeared on someone's palm. Richard wondered, is this Aaron's aura? He was shocked to realize it was her clothes. He immediately threw open the window and saw a figure down below. Aaron, Richard thought. He stood frozen for a moment in disbelief. How can this be? Recalling her words brought him even more pain. "I no longer belong to you." Richard wondered to himself why. The sound of his frantic footsteps echoed in the dead of night. Richard was chasing the person who looked like Aaron. Where did she go? Richard wondered breathlessly. Suddenly, he was confused and shocked when he saw where the person was headed. That's the outer city wall, Richard thought to himself. He immediately gave chase, shouting, "Wait!" Suddenly, the figure stopped as if waiting for him. Richard yelled, "Is that you, Aaron?" Suddenly, his eyes widened in horror. Without hesitation, the figure jumped. Looking down from above, Richard screamed, "No!" Watching the figure vanish deep into the forest, he cried out, "Aaron!" While Richard stood there watching, someone silently approached from behind and without hesitation pushed him off. Richard fell from the high city wall screaming in terror. Luckily, a branch broke his fall. He quickly grabbed onto the life-saving branch, his body dangling in midair above the forest. Both of Richard's hands clung tightly to the branch. Suddenly, someone appeared before him, lunging forward with unconcealed killing intent. The person decisively struck, severing the branch. Richard was knocked back by the splintering wood. Then he stretched out his hand as a green circle appeared. Third-level magic, reverse wind. Dust and smoke swirled around him. Instant cast rate 57%. Suddenly, the dark figure appeared in a tree. This kid's pretty impressive. To successfully draw a magic circle in such a short time. The person swung their sword at Richard. As expected of the legendary mage's student. Luckily, thanks to his agility, he easily dodged it. Angry, Richard's fingers dug into the earth. A glint flashed in his eyes, then a large flame erupted from his hand. "Fourth-level magic forest fire swarm!" Richard yelled. "Who are you?" In an instant, the forest was ablaze. Amidst the flames, Richard ran headlong, wondering to himself, "Is this revenge?" Recalling the events of that night, he thought, "It's because of what happened before." Suddenly, the perspective shifts. Someone is watching him from a tree. The person spoke in praise. "This kid's got a pretty sharp mind." Then Mai lunged from the tree, slashing Richard's arm. So you knew, using fire magic in the forest to protect yourself and evade pursuit. It's just a shame the client predicted your abilities. They didn't just hire one assassin to take care of you." Richard's shoulder was bleeding profusely. Just then, Mai casually tossed the wig from her hand. "There we go. We're on the outskirts of Thumlam. Teleportation magic from the outside won't be detected. No one will find out that we've already surrounded you." The scene changes. Popovic calmly gazed into the dark night. Loham began to speak. "Your Eminence, these past few months." Suddenly, a mystical circle appeared in midair, a figure flickering within it. Joel spoke, "Your Highness." Sir Suhelen stepped out of the portal. Joel continued, "You've returned. According to your previous schedule, this is much earlier than expected. Has something important happened in Thumlam?" she asked. "Popovic, is your intelligence accurate?" He replied, "A report concerning the legendary mage, Your Highness. Though things are developing faster than I expected, the general situation is correct." Suddenly, Suhelen spoke. Joel, stunned, replied, "She said to bring the Mage Enforcement Division." The old man immediately replied, "Yes, Your Highness." Suhelen smiled faintly. An interesting anomaly was forming around the academy. The full moon was illuminating the fierce battle in the forest. Richard's eyes were filled with rage. A voice called out, "Kid, you're already incredibly skilled?" A magic student who can use magic to withstand a force many times greater than his own. Then she shouted an order, "Assassins!" Immediately another one charged forward with his sword. Richard was under constant attack. At this point, it was too late to draw a magic circle to deal with them. Suddenly, he clenched his fist. Red threads instantly appeared. They wrapped around the man's body, binding him. Then Richard slammed his fist down on him, knocking him unconscious. And Vu watched the scene before her, stunned. Richard seized the opportunity while they were bound to quickly get away. The soul threads bind them and release a poison, allowing for an escape. But Vu wouldn't let him go. She immediately gave chase. "He's just a magic student, a kid. How did he learn this assassination technique?" She gripped her sword and lunged at him from behind. Richard's vision grew dark. Fresh blood splattered everywhere. Vu reminded her comrade, "Quick, take the antidote. Our assassin organization developed it. This kid's weapon is poisoned." As she spoke, she felt she had heard of this assassination technique somewhere before. Henry held the vial of blood in his hand. "I've collected enough of his blood. The mission is complete. Keep him alive, don't cause any more trouble. Although this isn't within the surveillance zone, it's still on the edge of Thumlam, so we shouldn't get too careless." Vu nodded. "Of course. Everyone has completed their mission. You can leave the rest to me." Look frowned. "What do you mean by that?" Vu smiled. "Another client offered a higher price for me to take his life." At that moment, in another place, Minnie was reprimanding someone. Are you insane, Stephen's son? Our goal this time was only to get Richard's blood as a conduit for the curse sigil to be used on him later. And you offered a higher price to hire an assassin to take his life. Stephen's son retorted, annoyed. Is there a problem? I successfully disguised myself as Aaron, luring him out of Tamlam's surveillance area. This is a great opportunity to eliminate him. How could we just take a little blood and call it a day? She was furious. You're so naive, don't you know that everyone's short-term movements in Tamlam can be traced with magic? Even though he was led outside the city, traces of Richard's presence on the outer wall are still preserved. If he dies here when they investigate, the traces of us ever coming to this outer wall will also be discovered. He revealed his calculations. I've already arranged everything. The body will be disposed of. By the time they use magic to track it, it will be too late. They won't find him. My principle as a person is to never miss any opportunity to eliminate a loose end. Minnie was flustered. Your curse plan is too slow, too conservative. For my future and my family's future, Richard must disappear quickly. At that moment, inside Richard's mind, strange black patches appeared. He hung his head low. A voice spoke, causing him to quickly open his eyes. Richard. A gentle moonlight appeared before him. Live on. It was perfectly round and bright. Round, and you must live on. Light shone in his eyes. I know, Mother. Richard bit down hard on his hand, drawing blood. The voice continued, Offer your blood. He reached his hand to the sky. Mother. The black patches gradually consumed Richard's body. Embrace the darkness without regret. Meanwhile, Luke was angry. This was clearly a single mission from the start. Don't take private jobs and use us as your stepping stones. Unless you share the reward for killing him with us, don't even think about taking his life. Anvu let out a laugh. Ha ha! A third-rate assassin like you is worthy of negotiating with me. Even killing all three of you at once wouldn't be a difficult task for me. He was slightly afraid. Anvu, you want to... Henry was suddenly startled. That kid! Behind Luke, who still didn't understand what was happening. He quickly turned his head. The sight of his comrade being sliced apart by Richard appeared right before his eyes. He was stunned. What is going on? Her eyes showed clear astonishment. He has the aura of a wraith on him! Henry charged forward in a rage. This kid dares to kill the captain! He gripped his sword and lunged with dizzying speed. Pay with your life! Richard raised his hand in front of him. The man's body was instantly cut multiple times. Luke was stunned. Vice Captain! But in a flash, Richard appeared in front of him, his sharp blade gleaming in the dark night. Anvu quickly rushed forward, using her sword to block his attack. She tossed the vial of blood to her comrade. Take this vial of blood back and leave here immediately. Anvu felt that her opponent was very difficult to deal with. This thing, she frowned, looking at Richard, is very dangerous. In the quiet, dark night, Anvu hid under her opponent's bed, her eyes glinting with killing intent as if walking the line between life and death. She lunges forward with a dagger. But in every mission where success is guaranteed, failure is not an option. Then you will never know how close you are to death the next time. This is the fate of an assassin. Anvu spun around, building momentum to slash powerfully at Richard. He easily dodged her attack. Two wings sprouted from Richard's back as he controlled the shadows to surround Anvu. She threw her sword forward, but the sharp blade could not harm Richard. Anvu leaped high into the air, keeping her distance from him. She caught her sword aimed straight for Richard's arm and dove down. His wound healed in an instant. Richard's eyes lit up, emitting a cold glint. Anvu's eyes widened, and a bead of sweat rolled down her cheek. She continuously attacked Richard. Anvu jumped back, maintaining a safe distance. He clutched his injured arm. When he let go, the wound was gone. It had completely healed. Anvu will stop you right here. So this is the legendary power of darkness. She stared at Richard as if he were some kind of monster. He unleashed a puff of green smoke and lunged forward with overwhelming speed. Anvu swung her sword in a single arc. Richard spun around, dodging the attack. She gritted her teeth, sweat dripping onto her blade. He elongated his arm, controlling it to shatter her sword. Anvu pressed her lips together. But this is a star steel weapon. Backed into a corner again. Even if it means breaking a taboo that could cost me my life, I have no choice but to fall back on my old profession. She used the Ko-Trang assassination technique. Richard saw countless red birds appear in the sky, the blood phantom illusion. They flew erratically, surrounding him. Anvu held a chain in her hand. Now just lose yourself in my blood shadow illusion. Having left the Kotrang assassination organization, I shouldn't even be able to use their techniques anymore. She wrapped the chain around Richard's neck. But in order to survive, killing my target has become instinct, whether you're a monster or not. The head is always a vital point. He twisted his head completely around his blood-red eyes, staring right at Anvu. A scream echoed from deep within the forest. Stephen's son wondered about the blood-curdling shriek. Could something have happened to those assassins? Minnie shook her head. Impossible. For safety, I also hired a former member of the Kotrang assassination organization for this mission. There's no way she can fail. Suddenly they both froze. Is that? They saw a figure looming in the forest. Someone was approaching their position. Stephen's son vaguely recognized them. It's the Enforcement Mages Guild.